Ling Han continued to walk forwards. Since he had already come this far, he naturally could not give up halfway. He wanted to know who was the culprit who had massacred the civilization of the last generation. Furthermore, what the hell was going on with the Celestial Path elites that had popped out from one mystery realm after another? Were they survivors of the other part of the previous generation's civilization? He was a curious person. The further they walked, the fresher the corpses became. Blood could still be seen flowing from them. If these were victims of the previous generation of civilization, then at least 2,000 years had passed, so why was the blood still not completely drained? Supreme elites? Ling Han tried to approach, yet his expression immediately changed drastically. Bursts of stinging pain shot through his skin, as if he had been cut by a saber. In fact, even breathing was difficult for him, suppressing him to the point of discomfort. If he took another step further, he might explode. Hiss, these people were already dead, so how could they still have such terrifying might? What heights had these people reached when they had been alive? He saw a corpse. It was clearly in human form, yet had a furry face. Its mouth was sharp, and its cheeks were like an ape's. It really looked like a monkey. Monkey man? He thought of Brother Monkey, and an inconceivable idea suddenly popped up in his mind. Could it be that Brother Monkey was also an existence from the last generation of civilization? Previously, when he had first arrived at Celestial Sea Planet, the lifespan of humans was only over 100 years. Even if they had successfully cultivated, their lifespan would not be more than 1,000 years. Thus, he had completely not associated Brother Monkey with the civilization of the last generation. But now that he thought about it, Brother Monkey could be suppressed by the Great Mountain and not die. What kind of strength was that? Could a Mystery Realm tier do it? It should not be possible. It had to be an elite above Celestial Path. That Brother Monkey had come from the last generation of civilization, so it should be possible. Moreover, now that a great many elites had appeared in various mystery realms, and they seemed to be inextricably linked with the previous generation of civilization, which further proved this fact. Thinking of Brother Monkey, Ling Han couldn't help but be moved. He took out a piece of clothing and covered the monkeyman's corpse, covering his face. A chill gripped at his heart. Since a great massacre had taken place in the last generation, would this kind of scene repeat itself? Why did he always encounter this kind of thing? When he had been in the lower realm, the five sects treated all the living beings in the lower realm like ingredients. They would concoct an alchemical pill once every 10,000 years, slaughtering millions and millions of living beings. This place also seemed to be extremely dangerous. No, he had to increase his cultivation level as soon as possible. Otherwise, what would he use to protect himself if an era of chaos came again? If he died, then the millions and millions of living beings in the dimensions inside his body would also die with him. Ling Han looked like he was listening quietly. Though it was too dark here to see clearly, his hearing was not affected. He heard movement. Something was rapidly approaching, but it was more than 30 meters away, or he would have been able to see it. The problem was, since he couldn't see the other party, how did the other party discover him? His vision was far superior to his. One had to realize that he could only see the maximum distance of 30 meters after activating his eye technique. Thus, just how powerful was this unknown being? Ling Han made his preparations. He could activate absolute fairness at any time. Finally, his eyesight caught sight of a black shadow. He was surprised because this was not a human, but rather a giant spider. However, this spider's body was massive, comparable to a calf. The giant spider's body was pitch black, and its 8 legs were like spears. As it ran, its speed was astonishingly fast. Ling Han, on the other hand, relaxed, because he could clearly see that within the spider's body, for patterns were glowing. A 4 inscriptions demonic beast was nothing to be afraid of. However, why was a 4 inscriptions demonic beast able to discover his presence from such a far location? Firstly, it was possible that spiders had astonishing hearing or sense of smell, and secondly, it was possible that this place was covered with spider silk, and he had unknowingly touched it, which alerted this giant spider. Shio. When there was still a distance of 21 to 24 meters between them, the giant spider began to spit out spider silk, which entwined around Ling Han. This had a powerful stickiness. If he really came into contact with it, Ling Han would be tightly entangled, which would greatly affect his mobility. Ling Han dodged, then countered with a punch of his own. The force of his punch took solid form, and a fist of light the size of an iron pot shot towards the black spider. This fist was enshrouded in high-level energy of metal, which increased its destructive power. Pong, his fist landed on the spider silk. Unexpectedly, this spider silk was very tough, and the punch actually did not manage to penetrate through. However, with this obstruction, the momentum of the spider silk was completely exhausted. It instantly fell and was taken back by the giant spider. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Although this punch wasn't his full power, it was enough to crush the majority of inscription tier elites. He didn't expect to be unable to suppress this giant spider. He was quite powerful. The giant spider spat out spider silk madly. Shio, shio, shio. This place was covered with white spider silk, as if multiple ribbons were wrapped around it, weaving into a large net at an astonishing speed. With another leap, it had already arrived on top of the spider web and rushed towards Ling Han. On the spider web, its speed was even faster. It soon arrived in front of Ling Han, and one of its long legs stabbed towards Ling Han, like a cold iron spear. Ling Han's pride was stoked, and he raised his fist to parry. The high-level metal energy wrapped around his fist. He wanted to see whose fist was tougher. Pong! The fist and the spider's leg collided, forming a massive shockwave, shaking the entire spider web. Ling Han laughed loudly, his fighting spirit blazing. He brandished his fists repeatedly, throwing a flurry of punches. The giant spider was also very powerful, and did not give Ling Han the slightest chance to clash head-on. After exchanging several hundred blows, Ling Han and the giant spider stopped at the same time. Blood dripped from Ling Han's fist, and the giant spider was not much better off either. His whole spider leg was slightly misshapen. Thankfully, it had a total of 8 legs, which was enough to continue fighting. You do have some abilities. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared, and he charged forward. Again, he used the demonic monkey fists, and as he shot out a punch, an ancient demonic monkey appeared, exuding endless viciousness. His accomplishments in the demonic monkey fists were getting higher and higher. The giant spider greeted the incoming attack, but when the demonic monkey fists was used, as many as 50 layers of power were stacked, as well as frequency attack. Just how powerful was this power? The giant spider was instantly suppressed and retreated continuously. Even the spider web could not bear the force of Ling Han's domineering punch, and was blasted apart, one string after another. However, neither Ling Han nor the giant spider noticed that the monkeyman's corpse whose head Ling Han had covered earlier suddenly opened its eyes. Amidst the pale white, there was a green light flickering. Ling Han shouted loudly, and his battle prowess became stronger and stronger. After a few more punches, he had broken the legs of this giant spider. The giant spider finally didn't dare to battle any longer. It hurriedly turned its remaining 6 legs and fled in panic. After paying the price of being hit by Ling Han's 3 punches, it finally managed to escape successfully. Ling Han didn't give chase. It was really too dark here, and if he ran around randomly, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to find the way back. Ling Han continued onwards. He wanted to know if there was another world outside this meat grinder. After walking for a while, he suddenly felt a sense of apprehension. This was a powerful sense of danger, making him feel that if he continued forward, he would be in great danger. In fact, he might even lose his life. He trusted this kind of instinct extremely, and immediately broke into a run and ran back. Shwa! A streak of light shot over at an incredible speed. Thankfully, Ling Han had continuously changed his course. This streak of light did not hit him, but rather practically scraped past his body. Even so, Ling Han still felt a stifling feeling assault him, causing him to almost stumble and fall to the ground. This white light was actually a thick spider's thread. Fuck! How could it be so thick? The giant spider from before was already astonishingly large, But the spider silk that it spat out was only as thick as a finger, and this one? It was about the size of the calf of a leg. Heavens, could it be that just now that was only a small spider and now it was a big one? Ling Han no longer hesitated and continued to run. The small spider was not that much weaker than him, so if a large one came, how was he supposed to deal with it? Ling Han ran as fast as he could, but not too long after, he turned around to take a look. In the boundless darkness, there was a colossal creature that was the size of a small mountain that was rapidly closing in on him. As its 8 legs flew, it seemed to be moving with the wind. This was a super large spider. Merely its eyes were larger than a lantern. And now it was staring at Ling Han, exuding a cold glare, that even Ling Han's skin was about to crack. A celestial path elite. Ling Han called out internally. This was definitely not something as simple as Mystery Realm tier. Just the slightest bit of aura was enough to make him almost pass out. It could only be a celestial path elite. Why was he so unlucky? He had initially thought that he had chased off a giant spider. He had not thought that it was actually just the junior of a celestial path level old spider. Gritting his teeth, he already gripped the heavenly pattern jade in his hand. Since he could see it, it meant that this giant spider had already caught up to within 30 meters of him. To celestial path elites, what was this tiny bit of distance worth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 show Ling Han throughout the heavenly pattern jade. He knew that it was impossible to kill or even injure a celestial path level demonic beast, but now that he was about to lose his life, what more could he care about this? He had to use whatever tricks he had. Shio, the heavenly pattern jade, smashed out and instantly recovered its weight of 5,000 kilograms, smashing towards that super large spider. Faced with this attack, even that giant spider had no choice but to stretch out one of its long legs and give it a push. Could not be helped. This was a 2-star level material and could pose a threat even to elites of Celestial Path, even if it was only shot out by a mere cultivator of extreme bone tier. However, this only bought 1 second for Ling Han. Ling Han gritted his teeth and took out the hammer again. He shot out lightning. If he was Celestial Path level, then he could stimulate a 1-star spirit tool to launch an attack, and even this giant spider would not be able to defend against it. But now, that giant spider merely spat out a thread and easily dispersed the attack. Ling Han's forehead was covered with cold sweat. The gap in cultivation level was really too wide. No matter what methods he used, it was all futile in the face of absolute power. What to do? What to do? Right at this moment, 2 green flames suddenly appeared ahead of them. Ling Han focused his gaze and saw that it was actually a corpse. It was the monkey man that he had seen previously. Fuck, it had come back to life? He couldn't help but cry out. What was going on here? Behind him, there was a Celestial Path tier-level giant spider that was pursuing him, and in front of him, the corpse of a monkey man had appeared. Who knew how many years it had been dead? And it was actually still walking towards him. What the hell? It was unknown how many years this monkey man had been dead for, but his blood was still gushing out. Merely this bizarreness meant that he must have been incredibly strong when he was alive. Even if he was dead now, he was probably an incredibly powerful zombie. Was it really a zombie? Just as Ling Han's imagination was running wild, Shio, the monkey man, leaped over Ling Han's head and landed between him and the giant spider, throwing a punch at the giant spider. Ling Han couldn't help but be startled, because he was very familiar with the fist technique of the monkey man. Demonic monkey fists. Pong, the monkey man and the giant spider exchanged a blow, and both of them trembled, falling backwards. Their abilities were equal. Ling Han's heart calmed. This monkey man should have come to help him, and could also block the giant spider. However, why did the monkey man want to help him? Wasn't he already dead? Ling Han's head was filled with wild thoughts, and he was very confused. The monkey man and the giant spider battled fiercely. He channeled the demonic monkey fists, but Ling Han could see very clearly that the latter only used 3 moves back and forth, and in the middle he had filled in a great many fist techniques that seemed to be real but were not. However, the monkey man was Celestial Path tier level, and in this state he was still domineering with every punch. When he threw a punch, though there was no appearance of the ancient demonic monkey, a majestic power surged by itself, as if it was strong enough to create a world. As it turned out, the demonic monkey fists could actually be as powerful as this. Ling Han was stunned. Furthermore, this monkey man clearly had not obtained the true essence of the demonic monkey fists, and could still unleash such might. Then, just how terrifying would the real demonic monkey fists be? Under the powerful attacks of the monkey man, the giant spider finally retreated. Perhaps it knew that there was nothing much worthy to fight with a dead person over. Even if both sides were injured, so what? The other party had long since died, so it was not a big deal. With the enemy gone, the monkey man immediately became dazed and circled around on the spot. Ling Han originally wanted to leave, but suddenly recalled that heavenly pattern jade was still ahead of him. After some thought, he decided to retrieve it. The giant spider should have run far away, and the possibility of it charging back was very low. Most importantly, the heavenly pattern jade was too important. He definitely had to get it back. He walked forwards, but after taking a few steps, cold sweat broke out on his back. Behind him, the monkey man that had been wandering around in a daze actually followed him without making a sound. This was a corpse, and it was swaying behind him. Wasn't that terrifying? If the monkey man hadn't helped him attack the giant spider just then, Ling Han would have definitely broken into a run and fled. He stopped, and so did the monkey man. Ling Han could see very clearly. The body of the monkey man was not corroded, but there was shockingly a large hole in its chest. Clearly, it had died from having its heart burst. And now, there were green flames flickering in the eyes of this monkey man, which looked very strange. A dead person got up and followed behind him shakily. This was already an incredibly strange thing. Ling Han turned around and continued walking. The monkey man also followed him shakily, as if it was clinging onto him. Just what kind of physique did he have? Drawing trouble, attracting animosity, and now even drawing ghosts? However, in this way, he would be able to calmly find the heavenly pattern jade without worrying that the giant spider would suddenly charge out. He searched carefully. Though it was very dark here, he could see everything within 30 meters, after all, and added with the fact that he was not in a rush, it was naturally not difficult for him to find the heavenly pattern jade. 10 minutes later, he had completed the mission. Should they still continue forward? Ling Han mulled over this. There was a monkey man following them. Though he had already been dead for a great many years, his abilities were still superior to Celestial Path. He could be considered a powerful bodyguard. Ling Han considered for a moment, and still decided to continue onwards. He walked ahead, and the monkey man followed behind him. The darkness was boundless, and there seemed to be no end to it. After walking for a long time, Ling Han felt his vision blur, and there was already a person blocking his way. To be more precise, it was a corpse. Monkey man. Weren't you in a daze and only knew to follow me? Why have you suddenly blocked my path? Ling Han wanted to circle around, but the monkey man kept moving, always blocking in front of him. What's the meaning of this? Clearly, a celestial level elite, even if he was already dead, was not someone that Ling Han could match. The other was blocking his way, and Ling Han couldn't get past him. Could it be that it was extremely dangerous ahead? This monkey man had never had any animosity towards him, and now it suddenly stopped him. Perhaps there would be great danger ahead, and that was why he had stopped him. All right then. Ling Han nodded and walked back. As expected, the monkey man did not stop him. Instead, just like before, it followed behind him shakily, like a walking corpse. This was a walking corpse. Ling Han felt like he was really too carefree. Being followed by a dead monkey man, he was actually still in the mood to pay attention to this kind of minor problem. Walking and walking, they soon returned to the plaza area. Father! The 7 toddlers all pointed at him. I know, Ling Han said with a nod. Behind him was a person with a gaping hole in his chest. Anyone who saw this would feel apprehensive. Don't be nervous. This brother even saved me, he explained. The 7 Calabash brothers all gave an "oh," instantly seeing this dead monkey man in a new light. Second baby stared at the monkey man for a while, then said, "This guy once stood on the 3rd level of Celestial Path. TSK, TSK, TSK." He even formed a silver core, but unfortunately it has already exploded. How strange. It has already died for so many years. So why can it still move? Could it be that his lingering soul is so strong? The third level of Celestial Path? No wonder there was still Celestial Path tier-level battle prowess after death. Ling Han rubbed his head. Could it be that he was going to bring the corpse of this monkey man that had been pierced through the heart out with him? However, with a Celestial Path level corpse following him, Ling Han couldn't chase it away. Sai, if you want to follow, just follow. Who asked you to be so awesome? Ling Han and the 7 infants walked in front, while the monkey man followed behind them shakily. When they arrived at the stone statue area in the center of the plaza, they saw that it had suddenly lit up ahead of them. That massive stone statue seemed to have come to life, exuding a golden brilliance. This light dispelled the darkness, and also caused the gigantic stone statue to completely stand out. It was about 450 meters tall. This was the image of a middle-aged man. His divine might was awe-inspiring, especially his eyes. Though they were carved from stone, they were bright and piercing, possessing an indescribable divine might. There is a boundary between life and death, and cannot be breached. A majestic voice rang out. Boom, boom, boom. It was so loud that Ling Han's ears were about to explode. The golden light of the stone statue instantly lit up the entire plaza. A look of fear instantly appeared on the monkeyman's face, and he continuously retreated until he had exited the plaza and entered into that area that was still dark. When the monkey man had completely retreated out of the plaza, the light exuded by the stone statue also dimmed in an instant, returning to its original appearance. Could it be that this stone statue was specialized in suppressing evil? This place was very strange. Corpses lay for thousands of miles, but the dead could stand. But there was a stone statue suppressing them, preventing the dead from entering into the realm of the living. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. After a person died, was there really a place like the underworld? Otherwise, what kind of place was this? What was the significance of this stone statue? As he thought this, Ling Han turned around and left. If he had the chance, he would return to Haiping Mountain and make some queries with Brother Monkey. It had been a long time since they had last seen each other. He wondered if Brother Monkey had escaped. Ling Han returned to the end of this hidden passage. He exited, and after covering his tracks, he continued to walk along the tunnel at the bottom of the lake. After carefully walking for a long time, he finally reached the end of this tunnel. The 8 of them went out and saw that a massive stone wall had appeared ahead of them. There was a massive painting engraved on it. However, there were at least over 100 corpses lying beneath the stone wall. Some had been beheaded, while others had been severed into 2 halves. Could be seen that the culprit was extremely cruel. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. There were also 3 living people here, 2 men and 1 woman respectively. Their backs were facing him, and they were looking up at that stone wall, as if they were comprehending some supreme martial arts technique. Hearing the movements of Ling Han and his group, the man in white among the 3 stood up and turned around. He looked familiar. Ling Han faltered for a moment, then immediately recalled that this was the person he had seen when he had leaped into the ice cave in the lake. Because the other had just walked out of the tree hollow, he had only glimpsed him. Another person has come to die. Tong Miao revealed a bloodthirsty smile and strode towards Ling Han. Ling Han frowned and asked, "You killed all the people here?" "That's right, and you are also about to become their companion," Tong Miao said. Once he saw blood, his killing intent would boil endlessly. If it was not for the fact that Dong Qi and Xian Ruyue were not weaker than him, the 2 of them could not possibly sit here peacefully either. Instead, they would already be dead. Ling Han focused his gaze. There were shockingly 6 inscriptions inscribed in Tong Miao's body, and there were also dozens of spots of light around him. This was obviously an Enlightenment tier elite, and he had broken through at 6th extreme. If an extreme bone tier cultivator could reach the 6th extreme, then when he was in the blood transformation tier, he must have reached the 6th change as well, because the higher the cultivation level, the harder it was to break through the limits. However, Ling Han was unafraid. Even if the trial grounds no longer suppressed Tong Miao's cultivation level, he still had absolute fairness. Ling Han smiled faintly. I don't believe it. So what if you believe it or not? I don't care at all. Tong Miao charged over and delivered a swift slash with his sword. In that instant, it was as if time had frozen. Ling Han once again saw the screen of light in his mind and asked him if he wanted to pull down the other's cultivation level. Reduce it to 6th extreme, Ling Han said through divine sense. Instantly, Tong Miao's cultivation level dropped rapidly. And Tong Miao was surprised. He stopped in his tracks and said, So you are only an extreme bone tier. Haha, a mere extreme bone tier actually dares to have extravagant hopes of becoming a candidate for young dragon? It is better to let me slice you in half with a single strike and end your fantasy. He charged out again. Even if his cultivation level had been suppressed to 6th extreme, he still thought that he could easily kill Ling Han. Ling Han clenched a fist, wrapped in high-level energy, and shot out a punch. Pong! The fist landed on the blade of the sword, and instantly, an intense brilliance flickered. However, neither the sword nor the fist suppressed the other, and just like that, they were stuck in a stalemate. Ling Han nodded internally. This Tong Miao was more or less the same as Hong Tianbu. They had both cultivated each cultivation level to the pinnacle, and when he faced off against Hong Tianbu, who was in the one inscription state, even if he used all his techniques, it would only be a result of both sides wounded. Thus, he decided to suppress Tong Miao's cultivation level to 6th extreme, just in case. Sure enough, it was the right choice. You really do have some abilities. Tong Miao was surprised. He believed that Ling Han's cultivation level was 6th extreme, and that was why he had pulled his cultivation level to 6th extreme so that they could have a fair battle. He was confident that he was invincible among his peers, and now that he had actually failed to gain the upper hand with a single strike, he was slightly surprised. Aside from Dong Qi and Xian Ruyue, there was actually another prodigy that was not inferior to him. Where are you from? He asked. Dark North Nation Ling Han. Ling Han said calmly. And Tong Miao was even more shocked. In this world where martial arts could only be considered primitive and obscure, there actually appeared such a prodigy. Twin prodigies of the imperial city, Hong Tianbu and Ling Han. So you are Ling Han. Xian Ruyue had long since stood up to watch the battle. And when she heard this, she couldn't help but give an "oh," revealing an expression of realization. Yet Tong Miao was at a loss. Hong Tianbu, Ling Han, what the heck were they? Forget it, there was no need to care. In any case, they would only become dead souls under his sword. Die! He brandished his sword in a slash. Even if power was equal, it was only power that was equal, but it did not mean that the battle prowess of the two of them was also equal. This was a completely different concept. Martial arts techniques, experience, and adapting on the spot would all influence the scales of victory and defeat. The sword slashed down, and with a qi, blazing flames burned on the blade, slashing down on Ling Han. The sword had not reached him, but the incredibly scorching heat wave had already assaulted him, causing Ling Han to feel as if even the hairs on his skin were about to be burnt, and a burnt mark had appeared on the comber of his robes, with smoke rising from it. Was he trying to make him run naked? Ling Han was furious. Pong! He activated the energy of stone, forming a defense in front of him. Then, with a soft whistle, he charged towards Tong Miao. Pong! 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 Iron fists endlessly struck the long sword, and tongues of fire spat out madly. High-level energy clashed, creating dazzling sparks. Xian Ruyue and Dong Qi were both watching the battle, and in unison, they exchanged a look, revealing a hint of wariness. This outsider was really very strong. Under normal circumstances, they would have an extremely high cultivation level and could easily kill Ling Han. However, in this place of trial, the battle would become relatively fair, and having a higher cultivation level would not have much of an advantage either. And only one person could emerge from each peak. In other words, they were all competitors, and there was not the slightest bit of room for compromise. Only one person would be able to rise above the others. Thus, the fact that Ling Han was so powerful also gave them a great warning. As it turned out, there was a third powerful competitor. They watched the battle seriously, capturing the weak points of Ling Han and Tong Miao. Everyone had their own weaknesses. Some were because the technique itself was not perfect enough, while there were some that had a mishap when they were cultivating. It was the same for Ling Han and Tong Miao. They were both searching for the other's weak point so that they could kill the other with a single strike. However, their strength was definitely strong and close in level, and there were pitifully few openings. Even if they were exposed, it would only be a flash. To grasp and react in such a fast-paced battle, this was incredibly difficult. Only if they battled for a long time and familiarized themselves with each other's moves would they be able to truly make use of the other's weaknesses and decide the victor in an instant. Ha ha ha! Great! Great! Tong Miao laughed loudly. Though your cultivation level is not high, your battle prowess is really not weak. You are qualified to become someone that I will kill and remember your name. Was this considered glory? Ling Han chuckled. How boastful! You will soon know if I am boasting or not. Yet Tong Miao was not angered, and merely showed a cold smirk. His left hand stretched out to his right hand, and in some unknown way he actually moved, and he was already holding a sharp sword in each hand. This could be dismantled? Only with two swords can I unleash my battle prowess. Tong Miao stuck out his tongue to lick the blade, his face filled with bloodthirsty madness. Freak! What a maniac! It's too ugly, the children said, but their eyes were bright. Ling Han shook his head. Looks like I definitely have to teach you a good lesson. Otherwise, what if you lead little kids astray? Cheeky mouth! Tong Miao charged over, both swords dancing at the same time. A strange scene appeared. The sword in his right hand was still entwined in flames, but the sword in his left hand was frozen in ice. It was clearly two opposing energies, yet he had perfectly fused them together, and they did not clash with each other. One was cold while the other was hot. The might of this attack was extremely astonishing. Ling Han only felt that one side of his body was boiling hot, while the other side was icy cold. This greatly affected the flow of his blood, causing the circulation of his mystical power to become slightly sluggish. He had unleashed a powerful move. Ling Han humphed. The demonic monkey fists channeled, and instantly, a ruthless aura circulated in Ling Han's body, making him seem as if he had transformed into an ancient demonic monkey that was out of control, capable of shattering the heavens and severing the earth. Instantly, the effects of the cold and heat attacks on him decreased greatly. Ling Han shuffled out and began his counterattack on Tong Miao. Tong Miao couldn't help but feel surprised. With both swords in hand, he has always been successful in every endeavor. Even in the previous great battle with Dong Qi and Xianxia, the two of them were still greatly affected. However, they also had powerful ultimate moves which also affected him. Otherwise, he would have long since severed the heads of those two. However, though he was shocked, he naturally wouldn't lose his composure. Brandishing his twin swords, he slashed them at Ling Han. This time, Ling Han did not release the image of the ancient demonic monkey. Instead, he fused it with himself, which had the effect of resisting cold and heat. This was also something that he had grasped after seeing the battle between the monkey man and the giant spider. Perhaps he had only unearthed 1% of the might of this fist technique. Dong Qi and Xianxia were both surprised. Previously, though they had dispelled Tong Miao's twin swords, they themselves had still been affected, unlike Ling Han, who seemed completely unscathed. How could this outsider be so freakish? In comparison, it was as if he should be the one who had inherited the true essence of cultivation, while they were the wildlings. Ha ha! Interesting. Tong Miao was more and more frenzied. His blood and qi suddenly boiled, and his battle prowess instantly soared. With a few slashes, Ling Han was no match for him, and was struck a few times in a row, blood gushing out. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and his blood and qi also boiled. He did not believe it. The two of them battled fiercely, but this time, it was Ling Han who was slightly on the upper hand. This caused Tong Miao, Dong Qi and Xianxia to all be moved. How could they not know that this meant that after Ling Han's blood and qi boiled, his battle prowess would increase even more than them. In fact, this increase was one of the criteria to measure the potential of a cultivator. It was mainly the extent of perfection to which a meridian opening tier had cultivated. Ling Han had the advantage, which meant that he had perfected the cultivation of meridian opening tier. This monster. Tong Miao was speechless. He was an existence inside the prison. Though that was a prison, there were innumerable elites inside. The sect master of heaven-crushing sect was even standing on the second level of celestial path, and with his teachings, his foundations were actually not as perfect as that of an outsider. Gritting his teeth, he placed the sword in his left hand into his right hand, and reassembled it into a single sword. Meanwhile, his left hand that was freed took out a small stone. He squeezed forcefully, and the rock shattered. Furthermore, it had shattered very thoroughly, and had completely turned into dust. Tong Miao took a deep breath, and the ashes all entered his mouth. Instantly, his eyes became bloodshot, and his aura also soared madly, far surpassing the amplification that the boiling of blood and qi should have. Fuck! He's using forbidden medicines just because he's no match. This was too shameless. This Tong Miao is really going all out, even using Mortality Bone 1, Xianxia said with a frown. Hee. If it was Fairy Xian, she wouldn't want to lose to a native, right? Dong Qi said with a chuckle. Xianxia did not speak. After a while, she nodded slowly. Though they were citizens of prison, the overall level of cultivation was far superior to this world, and prodigies like them were actually inferior to a native. If this spread out, they would really be laughed at. Hence, they could lose to a prodigy that had similarly come out of prison, but definitely could not lose to the weak natives outside. After Tong Miao had inhaled that strange dust, it was as if he had been pumped full of adrenaline, and his abilities had seen a doubling increase. Boom, he threw a punch which was incredibly fast. Ling Han used frequency attack and clashed head-on with his opponent. He couldn't help but stumble back, feeling as if his bones were about to break. There was no time for him to be stunned, and he hurriedly dodged to the side, because Tong Miao's sword was already slashing towards him. Father, that's the ashes left behind after an elite died. After absorbing it into the body, it can temporarily increase battle prowess, second baby said. Shameless bastard. Do you dare to have a fair battle? Eldest baby said disdainfully. Yet Tong Miao acted as if he had not heard anything. He only had one thought in mind, and that was to kill Ling Han. Inhaling the ashes of elites? Ling Han couldn't help but shiver. Fuck. This was too disgusting. Get lost, you damn pervert! He roared loudly, and the murderous aura was the first to rush out. Tong Miao couldn't help but freeze in his movements, but it was only an instant. He recovered and charged towards Ling Han again. It was as if, with the blessing of the ashes, his mystical power, spirit, and physical strength had all improved. This was the first time that the effects of Ling Han's murderous aura attack had been so weak. However, no matter how weak it was still effective. Tong Miao's movements froze, and his attack naturally became sluggish. This could also be considered a weakness. Ling Han's figure was agile, and he passed through his opponent's weak point. Then, he launched a counterattack. It was as if Tong Miao had gone mad. He once again split his sword into two, and delivered a series of mad slashes. A blood-red aura circulated all over his body. In fact, even his whole head of black locks had been dyed red. Night Demon 18 slashes, he roared lowly. The two swords slashed out rapidly, slicing out two incredibly thick and long flashes of sword qi. They actually turned into two massive bats that pounced towards Ling Han. Ling Han humphed and shot out the demonic monkey fists. A demonic monkey also surfaced, filled with a ruthless aura. It brandished its fists at the two giant bats. The demonic monkey unleashed its might, tearing apart the two giant bats. However, its power was also exhausted, and it turned into a shadow that disappeared. Xianxia and Dong Qi were both dazzled by this sight. How is this possible? A native has actually grasped such a terrifying ultimate technique. Why does that demonic monkey give me the feeling of a saint? It makes me tremble, and I don't even have the courage to look at it directly. Could it be that this is a supreme divine technique passed down from a demonic saint? After the two of them recovered from their shock, they both looked covetous. Saints were lofty beings who looked down on the rest of the world. Even if it was just a casual pointer, it was enough to completely transform one's battle prowess. And if this was the technique of a saint, even if it was taught to him by the demonic saint, it was still an indescribable treasure. It could make even great elites in prison go crazy for it. More importantly, Ling Han was only a native and did not have any powerful background. Even if they killed him and snatched his cultivation technique, so what? Did they have to be wary of anyone coming out to make trouble for them? Tong Miao was also affected by the demonic monkey, but Ling Han's overall cultivation level was too low, after all. This kind of effect was similar to the barrage of murderous aura. There was an effect, but the effects were actually not very strong. Hence, Tong Miao's attack faltered and poured out again, though its might had been weakened a little more. Ling Han brandished his fists to parry the incoming attack while preparing a counterattack. Heavenly Pattern Jade was already in hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Xiao, he threw out the precious tool in his hand, and using spiritual power, it instantly reached more than 9 times the speed of sound, recovering to the terrifying weight of 5,000 kilograms. Even if an Enlightenment tier cultivator were to face this attack head-on, it was possible that his bones would shatter and his body would be broken. Tong Miao's reaction was extremely fast, and he immediately raised the 2 swords to block in front of him. Pong, the Heavenly Pattern Jade, smashed onto the blade of the swords. These 2 treasured swords were made of some unknown material, but they were definitely extraordinary. Immediately, they shattered, and the web between Tong Miao's thumb and forefinger cracked. The Heavenly Pattern Jade's momentum didn't decrease, and it struck Tong Miao's body again, causing him to tremble and bounce back. However, after being blocked by the swords, the might of the Heavenly Pattern Jade was considerably reduced. This attack did not kill Tong Miao, but only caused minor injuries. Ling Han leaped out and stretched out a hand to grab the Heavenly Pattern Jade. This thing weighed more than 5,000 kilograms, and spiritual power was not strong enough to grab it back. Shua, Tong Miao immediately shot out a punch. He had only suffered light injuries, and had not lost his battle prowess. Ling Han leaped back, dodging this punch. Then, he raised the Heavenly Pattern Jade. When Tong Miao saw this, he couldn't help but feel terrified. He had just experienced the might of the Heavenly Pattern Jade, so how could he dare to take another blow? Previously, there were still swords that had blocked a blow for him, but there was none now. He was very decisive. Immediately, he turned and fled. His figure spread out. He did not dare walk in a straight line, and his figure changed extremely quickly, giving Ling Han no chance to lock onto him. In an instant, he had fled without a trace. In truth, as long as he ran out of a certain area, the suppression on his cultivation level would disappear. The cultivation level of Enlightenment tier, strength close to Mystery Realm tier, this was definitely not something that Ling Han and his group could match. Ling Han did not pursue. Just by looking at the sudden spike in speed, he knew that Tong Miao's cultivation level had already recovered. This meant that their first battle had already ended. What if he took the initiative to challenge, and the formation here no longer suppressed the other's cultivation level? Absolute fairness was his trump card, so he naturally couldn't use it easily. Dong Qi and Xian Ruyue exchanged a glance, both of them frowning. Ling Han's final attack caused them all to shiver. At such a close distance, how could they dodge an attack that was at 9 times the speed of sound? It should be known that if they fought with Ling Han, their cultivation level would be suppressed to extreme bone tier. In fact, this wasn't impossible to win. As long as 2 people cooperated sincerely, one would attract the enemy's fire, and the other would be able to take advantage of the opening to attack. After all, Ling Han only had a single Heavenly Pattern Jade. The problem was who would be in charge of attracting enemy fire. This was no joke. One could lose their life at the slightest provocation. To say nothing of the fact that they had just met by chance, even if they were senior brother and junior sister, they would have to consider carefully if they would be sold off by the other party. Don't forget, This also involved the competition for the quota for young dragon. Thus, it was completely impossible for them to cooperate. The two of them smiled at Ling Han, appearing to be very friendly. They were very familiar with the rules of the formation here. If a low-level cultivator took the initiative to attack a high-level cultivator, the formation would not activate and forcibly suppress those with higher cultivation levels. Thus, if Ling Han made a move, they would be able to kill Ling Han with their higher cultivation level. In the depths of their hearts, they naturally hoped that Ling Han would force himself to make a move. Unfortunately, Ling Han didn't fall for it. Even though he looked young in the Genesis world, just how many trials and hardships had he gone through? He had always maintained a youthful mentality and was filled with enthusiasm for life. He had always been pursuing strength, but in other areas he was incredibly old and experienced. Ling Han also smiled at Dongqi and Xian Ruyue. Then he imitated them and sat down in a cross-legged position, looking at the carvings on the stone wall. The three young prodigies naturally couldn't sit here out of boredom, so the painting on the stone wall definitely had a deeper meaning. It said that a supreme divine technique is contained within. If one can comprehend it, not only will it help to improve one's cultivation level, it can also be of use in the following trials, Xian Ruyue said. Her voice was gentle and melodious. Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had not thought that Xian Ruyue would actually take the initiative to express goodwill. Meanwhile, Dongqi smirked coldly. He naturally knew that Xian Ruyue was deliberately trying to worm her way into Ling Han's good books. Could it be that this woman wanted to use her beauty to tempt Ling Han so she could obtain his fist technique? How shameless! Dongqi spat internally, but was also filled with jealousy. Xian Ruyue was a great beauty, and her natural talent in cultivation was astonishing. She was also the disciple of the primordial true lord, and her background was astonishing. If he could become her partner, he would be able to obtain a great many benefits. Unfortunately, Xian Ruyue didn't like him at all. This was merely an extreme bone tier, and furthermore, he was a native at that. What right did he have to be superior to him? Dongqi closed his eyes. Though he was arrogant, he was not an idiot. If he fought with Ling Han here, it would only allow Xian Ruyue to reap the benefits. Thus, he would only flip out after the trial. With his cultivation level of enlightenment tier, wouldn't it be easy for him to kill an extreme bone tier? No matter how freakish he was, he would not be able to escape death. Ling Han smiled at Xian Ruyue and said, "Thank you for your guidance. My name is Xian Ruyue." The woman smiled beautifully. Ling Han nodded. There was no need for him to introduce himself. The other party had long since found out. He asked, "I wonder if Miss Xian has figured out anything?" Xian Ruyue shook her head. Ruyue is dull, and did not manage to distinguish anything. Ling Han raised his head, and saw that the carvings on the stone wall couldn't be called drawings at all. Instead, they looked more like random graffiti, and he couldn't tell what was being drawn. Could it be that they were just random drawings? This could also be regarded as a test. Everyone thought that it was the illustration of some supreme divine technique, but in the end, it was a waste of time. Brother Ling, it's not just the celestial sea planet that has a young dragon trial. There are also other places that have it, Xian Ruyue said. According to a senior, this stone carving does indeed contain supreme divine arts, but the profound secrets within definitely can't be leaked. Otherwise, elites will move and kill both the leaker and the one who has learnt the technique. One which also meant that this young dragon trial was actually backed by some force? Ling Han smiled at Xian Ruyue. "Thank you for your guidance, Miss Xian." Xian Ruyue nodded. She had changed her mind and deliberately formed a good relationship with Ling Han. Ling Han focused his full attention on the stone carvings. Just what kind of secret was hidden within them? As long as there was really some supreme martial arts technique hidden within, Ling Han was sure that with his comprehension ability, he would definitely be able to tell. He took a deep breath, calmed himself, and continued to study it. However, the messy strokes were still a mess, without any rhythm, without any sense of aesthetic, and nothing could be distinguished. "Oh!" Second baby suddenly clapped her hands. "I understand," she called out in a childish voice. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head. Only second baby could tell? It must be her eye technique. He activated his eye technique and looked at the stone carving again. He couldn't help but feel pleasantly surprised, because he saw something different. In truth, there was no change to the painting at all, but the hierarchy was clearly defined. Some were in front and some were behind. Furthermore, it was not 2 layers, but rather a dozen over layers. In fact, if one looked more closely, it was far from a dozen over layers. A 3-dimensional map appeared in Ling Han's mind. This was the structure of the human body. At this moment, they were all meridians in the human body. However, merely the meridians of the human body didn't mean anything. As long as one unblocked his meridians, who didn't know the structure of their own meridians? Ling Han took a closer look, then came to a sudden realization. This was still combined with light. Under the present light, one of the meridians was especially distinct, as if it had lit up. He smiled internally, knowing that he had already unraveled the scheme of the person who had left behind this stone statue. Every once in a while, Ling Han would look at the changes in the diagram of meridians. This was actually a diagram of the circulation of mystical power. After a whole day, the change of light formed a cycle, and Ling Han finally grasped all the changes in the meridians. This was a cultivation technique, and its exact effects were still unclear. Ling Han waited for another half a day. When the sun rose, he began to use the new cultivation technique to cultivate. However, the result confused him completely. That was because this was completely unable to extract the power of heaven and earth. It was completely pointless effort. Could it be that he himself had misunderstood? Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. He mulled over this again, and he felt that there was nothing wrong with his understanding. In order not to waste time, Ling Han switched to channeling the brother monkey cultivation technique, extracting the power of heaven and earth for his own use. A thought suddenly flashed in his mind. Could he do this? After channeling the brother Ling Han channeled the new cultivation technique again. A miracle happened, and it was as if all the pores on his body had opened up. The speed at which he extracted the power of heaven and earth instantly increased manyfold. As it turned out, this was a supplementary cultivation technique. Ling Han was overjoyed. Brother Monkey cultivation technique was already very awesome in the first place, and added with this supplementary cultivation technique, how much faster could his cultivation speed surpass an ordinary person? He shockingly discovered that following the channeling of this cultivation technique, there was actually an additional mark on his wrist. What? Xianxia and Dong Qi opened their eyes at the same time. Though they could not see it with the naked eye, they could still sense it with their divine sense. Ling Han seemed to have become the center of the whirlpool, absorbing a great amount of power of heaven and earth that was surging towards him. Just how strong was he? He was comparable to them. It should be known that they were enlightenment tier elites. The power of heaven and earth that an extreme bone tier cultivator absorbed could compare to the power of heaven and earth absorbed by an enlightenment tier cultivator. What kind of concept was that? Are you a monster? That's not right. They immediately recalled that Ling Han had also cultivated the previous day. Furthermore, he had also stimulated a considerable amount of the power of heaven and earth, but it was definitely not as exaggerated as it was now. In other words, this was a sudden change. Could it be that this guy had unraveled the secret of the painting? They were practically in no mood to cultivate, and both of them were filled with envy. If they could also obtain this cultivation technique, then wouldn't they be able to advance into celestial path in the shortest time possible? This was a great opportunity. Ling Han was completely focused on cultivating, and the power in his body was surging and majestic. With every passing second, his improvement was extremely obvious. Going by this rate, he would only need a short 6 days to reach the peak stage of the third extreme. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face. Even if he didn't get first place in the trial, he wouldn't lose out at all. When half an hour had passed, and seeing Ling Han open his eyes, Dong Qi immediately declared proudly, "Ling Han, tell me the secret of the painting, and I can use treasures to trade with you." What treasure could compare to this supplementary cultivation technique? Moreover, Xianxia had previously revealed that if the secret of the cultivation technique was leaked, an elite would make a move. Whether it was him, the teacher, or Dong Qi, the one who had learnt the technique, they would both be killed. Ling Han didn't care whether Dong Qi died or not, but if his life was to be sacrificed, he naturally wouldn't do it. Not interested. Ling Han shook his head. Dong Qi's eyes sharpened, and he said, "Native, don't be too arrogant, and forget who you are." "Oh, who am I?" Ling Han asked. "You are only a country bumpkin that has just come into contact with the boundaries of cultivation in this primitive, backward land, and have absolutely no idea how big the world is." Dong Qi said coldly. "And how would you know that underneath the world that you know, there is also a massive prison? There are so many elites inside, and the height of cultivation level is not something that you can imagine at all." Prison? Ling Han was surprised. Going by that theory, whether it was the earliest demonic rat or the later Cui Jinhai, as well as celestial path elites that popped out like bamboo shoots after the rain, they all originated from the prison. In this world, there was a cage that was being suppressed, but the dramatic change of heaven and earth had allowed them to escape. Hold on, could it be that because they were about to escape, the heaven and earth had changed drastically? Ling Han's mind whirred, but his expression did not change. He merely asked calmly, "As a prisoner, where do you get such big words from? Are you insulting those seniors and lords?" Dong Qi said with a sneer, "Do you think that just because the Dark North Nation has a holy emperor or whatnot, he can protect you? Wrong. Qin Fengyan has only just entered the celestial path, so as long as the crack in the cage opens a bit more, an even more powerful figure will appear and easily kill Qin Fengyan. Thus, as a native, you should have some self-awareness." Ling Han shook his head and said, "You keep saying native and country bumpkin, which makes me very angry." Dong Qi laughed loudly. "So what? Do you still intend to make a move on me?" He, on the other hand, wanted nothing more than for Ling Han to do the same. The weak would actively provoke the strong, and the formation would not weaken the cultivation level of the elite. Then, killing Ling Han would only be a matter of raising his hand. Of course, he would first squeeze out Ling Han's secret. Ling Han's eyes were baleful, and he said, "Try calling me a native again. Native, native, native." Dong Qi laughed loudly and provoked, "I already said, how many times do I have to repeat it? Native." Ling Han shook his head. "Why do people always seek death?" He summoned the heavenly pattern jade, wanting to end the battle in the shortest time possible. Dong Qi's eyes narrowed slightly. Though he did not recognize this as heavenly pattern jade, he had personally witnessed the might of this thing. He mustn't be careless, or else he may meet with unexpected failure in what seems to be something very easy for him. "Native, do you only know how to act violently with your mouth?" He laughed loudly and continued to provoke Ling Han. 1, 2, 3. Ling Han began counting. "Have you gone stupid?" Dong Qi was confused. 5. The killing intent in Ling Han's eyes was on full display, and he suddenly charged out. "Haha! You're truly seeking death." Dong Qi laughed loudly. He didn't dodge or evade, and he would only make a move when Ling Han truly arrived. In this way, Ling Han would be the one to take the initiative to attack, and he had absolute confidence that even if Ling Han shot out the heavenly pattern jade with his cultivation level of enlightenment tier, he would still be able to dodge or even send it flying. 42 meters, 33 meters, 27 meters, 24 meters. Absolute fairness activated. Ling Han raised his right hand, and Shua, the heavenly pattern jade, was thrown out. Driven by spiritual power, it instantly reached 9 times the speed of sound, shooting rapidly towards Dong Qi. "What?" Dong Qi's expression changed drastically, because he discovered that his cultivation level had directly fallen to extreme bone tier. The formation clearly shouldn't have been activated, so why had his cultivation level been severed? Could it be? He suddenly came to a realization. Ling Han had a similar formation on him? Shit. He wanted to dodge, but under 9 times the speed of sound. How could he make it in time? There was nothing else he could do. He could only forcefully raise his arms in front of him. Pa! He had just raised his arms when the heavenly pattern jade interrupted him. Blood sprayed through the air, and his arms had already been forcefully broken. The heavenly pattern jade didn't diminish in power, continuing to smash toward his chest. Dongqi just barely managed to dodge. Pa! The heavenly pattern jade hit his left rib, instantly tearing off a large piece of his flesh, as well as a few NBS, forming a bowl-sized hole on the left side. He screamed in pain, yet without the slightest hesitation. He turned around and fled, his figure flying. Originally, he wouldn't have been so weak, but who asked him to have completely not thought that Ling Han would have a formation like absolute fairness? And he had the idea of screwing Ling Han over, counterattacking only when the latter attacked him, which led to a shortage of reaction time. Only after running far away did he turn around and glare harshly at Ling Han. Only then did he rise up again and disappear into the distance. Haha, you still want to trick my father? In your dreams. You're asking for trouble. Don't you know that our father is the ancestor of trickery? The toddlers were all laughing and joking. Ling Han's expression darkened. How could there be such a compliment? Having been exposed so greatly by you guys, how am I supposed to screw others over in future? Xianxia also broke out in a cold sweat, looking at Ling Han strangely. Just now, she had also thought that Ling Han had been rash, and had fallen for Dongqi's provocation. But who would have known that Dongqi was the one who had been screwed over and ended up falling into his trap instead? Both his arms had been destroyed. Unless he could find a spiritual herb that could revive his bones, he would be a cripple forever. Thankfully, she had suppressed her killing intent. Otherwise, if she had faced that attack from Ling Han, she would probably have been hit as well. Brother Ling is truly skilled, Xianxia said with emotion. She was truly impressed by Ling Han's flawless performance of a weaker person defeating a stronger opponent. Ling Han smiled. Thank you for your praise, Miss Xian. He reflected on himself. If he had used his murderous aura to attack before smashing the heavenly pattern jade out, then Dongqi probably wouldn't have been able to escape. I'll take my leave first. Ling Han cupped his hands at Xianxia. Please, Xianxia said with a nod. Her eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Since Ling Han could comprehend the secret of the stone painting, there was no reason that she couldn't. Ling Han left with his 7 babies. They had not walked too far when they saw a massive garden appear ahead of them. There was grass everywhere, and there were multiple flowers that were as tall as a man waiting to bloom. These flowers grew very closely together, and there seemed to be no pattern to them. However, upon closer look, there seemed to be a kind of pattern to them. It was just that the pattern could not be found at this moment. With a sweep of his eyes, he could still see that this garden was filled with people, and they had all fallen in various positions. Some were facing upwards, while others were sprawled out on the ground. Judging by the faces of those facing upwards, their complexions were rosy, and it was as if they were not dead. Very soon, Ling Han saw a person get back to his feet. In a daze, he took a few steps forwards, and saw a flower blooming beside him. Pa! This person collapsed again, and after a while, the blooming flower closed back up again. This scene was still repeating, as they watched one after another get back to their feet, and fall head first after taking a few steps. This was very comical. Ling Han finally understood. This place was not a land of death. Those flowers would only cause one to pass out. The problem was that the effects of the pollen were very strong. One sniff would cause one to fall unconscious, and the state of unconsciousness would be for a very, very long time. Ling Han noticed that after a person fell to the ground, he did not wake up even after 2 hours had passed. He observed patiently, and discovered that after another hour, that person finally woke up. Ling Han did not only observe one person. He concluded that most people would be in a coma for about 3 hours, and only a very limited number would be able to wake up ahead of time, but it was only slightly ahead of time. Was this a formation? Ling Han observed. He wanted to know how the flowers would bloom because the same flower would sometimes bloom when people passed by, but at other times it would not. He activated the eye technique, and the world instantly appeared in front of him in a different way. His brain was working at high speed. This garden was too big, and there were too many flowers. It was difficult to find the pattern of bloom of every single flower. Ling Han soon gave up the idea of figuring out all the patterns of blooming of the flowers, because he only had to find a path to pass through. He continued to observe and deduce. This volume of calculation was still astonishingly large, because after every flower bloomed, the pollen would disperse at a different time and in a different range. Even with Ling Han's ability, he could only calculate a small area. He had the babies enter into the essence nurturing gourd, while he advanced alone. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His steps were light, but after taking a few hundred steps, he felt his vision blur and he collapsed onto the ground. Fuck, he had miscalculated and had fallen for it. He slowly regained consciousness, and his memories instantly returned. Hurriedly, he retreated back the way he had come. He did not want the pollen to be scattered again, and cause him to be in a coma for another 2 to 3 hours. Ling Han started to calculate again. In truth, his progress was already astonishingly fast. Usually, it would be good enough if others could walk a dozen over steps, but for him, he had taken a few hundred steps. The gap was extremely wide. After half a day, Ling Han set out again. Teng, teng, teng. Another few hundred steps later, Ling Han was hit again and collapsed onto the ground. After waking up this time, Ling Han was slightly troubled. That was because he had already surpassed the majority of people, and there were only a few people ahead of him. Furthermore, they were mostly sprawled out on the ground. There was no one to scout the way for him, so he could only use his eye technique to observe, so his speed would be considerably slower. He decided to prepare some food first. After feeding the 7 babies, he also entered into the essence nurturing gourd. The plants here were dense, and no one would see them. He had overused his brain today, so he indeed needed a good rest. The next morning, he immediately exited the gourd and sat down cross-legged to cultivate. At this moment, the sun just happened to rise. Ling Han channeled the 2 cultivation techniques at the same time. One was the main cultivation technique, while the other was for a support cultivation technique. There was no conflict, and with the strength of his spiritual power, he was completely capable of multitasking. This was astonishingly fast. In another 4 days, he would be able to reach the peak stage of the 3rd extreme, and there was no need to worry about the treasured fruit of life. The treasured fruits of life that he had previously prepared had not been used all this while, and was completely capable of supporting him to charge up to the 4th extreme. However, if a 4th extreme wanted to go any higher, he would have to think of another way. Aside from cultivation technique, the biggest factor that limited one's cultivation level was the treasured fruit of life. Without enough treasured fruits of life, who would dare to rashly break through? Did they want to die? Ling Han cast aside the distracting thoughts in his mind and began to observe and calculate again. At this time, he could only consider one step after another, and his speed was considerably slower than yesterday, but compared to the others, his speed could be considered freakish. After this day ended, Ling Han had already walked to the very front. Either someone had already passed or he would definitely be the first to pass. When the 4th day was about to end, Ling Han unexpectedly discovered that a flower had actually borne fruit. Even if there was still a very far distance separating them, he could still sense an incredibly dense life force. This was a treasured fruit of life. This was too coincidental, wasn't it? Whatever he lacked, he would get. Ling Han only thought for a moment, and then set this thought aside. The most important thing now was how to harvest it. This was not on the path that Ling Han had to pass through, but rather would deviate very far from the main route, which would definitely waste a lot of time. Plucking the treasured fruit of life. How could it be considered a waste of time? Ling Han smiled, and naturally turned around without the slightest hesitation. The bushes here were much denser, and there was no one helping him to scout ahead either. Ling Han could only observe bit by bit with his eye technique, so his progress was extremely slow. Oh no, I've been hit. It was not that he had completely made no mistakes. Thankfully, the fragrance of this flower was not fatal. After 2 hours, he regained consciousness and once again advanced. After spending a whole 2 days, Ling Han finally arrived in front of that treasured fruit of life. The branches bore a total of 9 fruits, exuding an incredibly dense aura of life. Ling Han had previously obtained an enlightenment tier-level treasured fruit of life. In comparison, it was far inferior to these 9 fruits. Thus, these 9 fruits were most likely Mystery Realm tier-level treasured fruits of life. Ling Han naturally wouldn't be reserved, and put away the 9 treasured fruits of life. At present, he was only in extreme bone tier. He believed that no matter how freakish he was, such a treasured fruit of life would be enough to help him break through to the next cultivation level. Ling Han was extremely pleased. This trip had really not been in vain. His gains were practically bountiful. He returned to the right path and continued onwards. Another 2 days later, Ling Han finally walked out of this garden area. There was a dense forest ahead of him, and Ling Han nodded. Coincidentally, he could break through here. In these few days, he had already reached the peak stage of the 3rd extreme. Break through to 4th extreme. His advancement was too fast. He had only stayed at the stage of 3rd extreme for less than 10 days, but Ling Han did not have the time to waste. He had to improve his cultivation level as soon as possible. The benefits contained in this young dragon trial had exceeded his imagination, so he definitely had to get first place. Though the previous battles had been very fair, and he could suppress the cultivation level of any elite he encountered, who could guarantee that it would be the same in the future? Thus, one's own strength was the most dependable. He found a secluded place, and when the sun rose on the 2nd day, he completed the last accumulation of mystical power and began to break through to the 4th extreme. The improvement of one's cultivation level was the improvement of one's level of being, and to be frank, the improvement of one's level of being was to tear open the shackles in one's body. It was as if the heavens had imposed a restriction, causing mortals to be born ordinary. They had to experience this process and advance step by step towards becoming stronger. Ling Han ingested a treasured fruit of life, then began to tear through his shackles. Pa! One of the shackles was shattered, and Ling Han instantly felt relaxed. But at the same time, a portion of the life force in his body was also ruthlessly extracted. Fortunately, the life essence formed by the treasured fruit of life immediately replenished this deficiency, allowing Ling Han to maintain a strong vitality. Pa! One after another, the shackles of life were endlessly broken. Ling Han gritted his teeth and bared his teeth, because accompanying this process, bits of bone fell off, and the new bones were advancing in an even stronger direction. 3 hours later, Ling Han was done. 4th extreme. With Ling Han's rate of cultivation, he would probably be able to break through again in less than 10 days. This was so fast. Wasn't it that the higher one's cultivation level, the slower one's rate of cultivation would be? Ling Han thought about what the Calabash brothers had said in the past, and couldn't help but feel a thought well up in his mind. Probably only if he advanced into the celestial path would he be considered to have truly begun the path of martial arts. Just like in the Genesis world, how long would it take to advance from body refining tier to shattering void tier? In the lower realm, how long would it take to advance to shattering void tier? And in the immortal realm, how much would it take? In fact, in the celestial realm, some people would directly skip this process at birth. For example, the Calabash brothers were born without any shackles. As long as they grew, their cultivation level would naturally increase. Furthermore, they were the kind of being that had broken through the limits, so their level of being was naturally superior to others. Thus, the fact that he was now cultivating faster wasn't because he was too heaven-defying, but rather that in the real world of martial arts, this stage was completely the beginning of a journey, so it was normal for his cultivation speed to be faster. Wasn't it said that having a treasured fruit could allow one to reach the heavens in a single step, directly reach the level of inscription, enlightenment, or even find mystery realm tier? This was proof enough. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared. In this way, he would be able to reach mystery realm tier in the shortest time possible, catching up to the standards of the current younger generation, and after stepping on the celestial path, it would no longer be possible for him to advance so rapidly. Even an innate divine physique would not be able to ignore the existence of the barrier of cultivation level. For example, the demon race. After advancing into celestial path, they would not have much of an advantage over humans. Ling Han released the babies. He had prepared very well for this trip. At least, he had brought enough food with him. Not only did he have the essence nurturing gourd, but he had also seized a considerable number of spatial spirit tools, which he had filled completely with food. Thus, there was absolutely no need to worry that they would starve to death if they stayed here for too long. The 8 of them continued onwards and entered into the forest. Ling Han was surprised. He discovered that there were signs of people walking ahead of him. It was not a wild beast, but rather humans. There was actually someone that had managed to get ahead of him. Ling Han was slightly disbelieving. Previously, he was far in the lead, and though he had spent some time plucking the treasured fruit of life, there shouldn't be such a big gap, right? If someone was always in front of him, why didn't they pluck the treasured fruit of life? It can't be that he considered it not worth his while. It was the treasured fruit of life after all. Forget it, he'd just leave. Ling Han raised his guard and passed through this dense forest. A small platform suddenly appeared in front of him, and behind the platform, the mountain rapidly became steeper, and the path was extremely narrow, only allowing one person to walk. The platform was covered with stone statues. Some looked like humans, some looked like horses, and some looked like carts. They were divided into red and black. Wasn't this like a game of Go? Ling Han saw that the platform was divided into small squares, and the pieces were arranged according to a pattern. They were definitely pieces. Furthermore, the game had just begun, and both sides had a piece that had crossed the boundary. Outside the game, there were a great many people watching. They were all on the side that was close to him, while there was no one on the other side. Ling Han looked again, yet was slightly shocked. That was because there was a person standing on one side of the general and commander positions, and on the other side was something that was enshrouded by a ball of light. It was completely indistinguishable what it looked like. Formation spirit? Ling Han speculated in his mind. He then took a few steps forward to observe the situation. You're really lucky. That was a young man. He acted very familiar with Ling Han and patted Ling Han's shoulder. We were trapped for a very, very long time in that garden previously. Afterwards, for some reason, those flowers actually stopped blooming, and only then did we successfully pass. You don't know, but when those flowers bloom, they can immediately knock one unconscious. This person was a bit of a chatterbox. He had clearly asked him what was going on with the chess game, yet he had drawn the topic back to the garden from before. Ling Han didn't interrupt him because this also solved a question in his mind. No wonder so many people had raced ahead of him. He should be the first to barge through that garden, and after that there would be no further effect on him. Why? Was it to deliberately waiting for someone? This wasn't impossible. After all, there were very few people who had cultivated eye techniques, so this stage could make the person who came first lose a great advantage in time. Initially, Ling Han had been racing ahead, but after resting for a night in the forest, and spending another 3 hours to break through, there was nothing strange about him being surpassed. Then could he be considered have contributed to the success of others? Thinking of those 9 treasured fruits of life, Ling Han suddenly realized that they could be considered a reward. Cough, cough. Ling Han reminded. You should get to the point. Why are you still talking about other nonsense? Just at this moment, a terrible scream was heard. Ling Han looked over and saw that in the game of Go, the victor had already been decided. At first, this was nothing, but this general was about to die from being stepped on by a horse. With a stomp from the stone horse, that person was forcibly stomped into a meat patty. Fuck, so ruthless? Hey. Did you see that? This chess game is extremely vicious, the young man said. If you lose, you'll lose your life. Ling Han nodded. You're spouting a lot of nonsense. I've already seen it with my eyes, so there's no need for you to say anything else. Once this person died, the pieces quickly returned to their original positions, as if they had a life of their own. This was a formation, Ling Han immediately thought. Brother, this stage's test is truly freakish. Disregarding abilities, it's actually a chess tournament. The young man was about to go crazy. Can't we barge in forcefully? Ling Han asked with a smile. That would definitely be courting death, the young man hurriedly said. You came late, so you didn't see it. Previously, there were indeed people who barged in forcefully, and some even teamed up, but in the end, they were all wiped out in an instant. Hiss, those chariots, horses, and soldiers, all of them are boundlessly terrifying. They definitely have celestial path-level abilities. No matter how many of us there are, we would not be able to match them. Ling Han nodded and said with a smile, "Then from now onwards, you have to work hard on your chess skills. This is not a very difficult task." "Sigh, aren't I just learning now?" the young man said with a bitter expression. "Has anyone passed?" Ling Han asked again. "Not even one." The young man sighed. "The chess skills of the other side are astonishingly high. Some people thought they had seen through the other side's tricks, but in the end, when they went up to fight, they were crushed into dust." Ling Han nodded, thanked that person, and began to circle around this chessboard. He was a formation master, and to ask him to set up such a chess game where he could play against another, to be honest, he couldn't do it. But what if he directly destroyed the formation of the chess game? He observed, and did not step out to challenge them at the first instant. However, no one else stepped forward. It was clear that there were far too many precedents. No one wanted to lose their lives in vain. "Haha! Bunch of trash. Just watch me." A green-robed man stood up. He strode forwards and walked to the position of general. Instantly, light and shadow appeared on the general's seat opposite him, representing the beginning of the chess game. Who is that person? Someone was curious. Could it be that this guy could not see that those who had entered the arena earlier had all died? That's Li Shuangyi. Someone recognized the identity of this challenger. Oh, the one who is known for being a master of both Qin and chess? That's right. He is Zhou Shangren's disciple, and his abilities are quite extraordinary. Since he is known as a master of both Qin and chess, it should be possible for him to win. Let's quickly memorize the way he makes every single move. Later, if he wins, we will do the same. Yes, yes, yes. With this reminder, everyone became excited. The game of Go began, and both sides exchanged blows. You would take a soldier from me, and I would take a pawn from you. The pieces collided and shattered, and there were fewer and fewer pieces on the field. The victor was about to be decided, right? Li Shuangyi remained calm and composed the entire time. He could also move around, but this was only limited to the 9 squares of the commander-in-chief position. Moreover, he had to play according to the rules of the game of Go, so he couldn't run around randomly. Cannon 5 moves 6 steps horizontally. Horse 6 advances 4 steps. He kept issuing commands, directing his own pieces to begin their offensive. Winning, he is going to win. Everyone was excited. Even if their chess skills were inferior, it was not difficult for them to judge the situation. Li Shuangyi was already completely on the upper hand, and it was only him that could attack. A horse, a carriage, and a pawn that crossed the river bore down on him, forcing the latter to parry repeatedly. In a few moments, another 3 pieces had been taken. At this point, the outcome was already decided. As expected, after only 3 moves, the opposing general was killed, and the chess game ended. Li Shuangyi smiled proudly and strode towards the opposing side. None of the chess pieces attacked. When he had walked past, the game quickly recovered. The pieces that had previously been shattered had also returned to their original state, as if they could reverse time. You all saw how I won, right? Li Shuangyi turned around and swept an eye over the masses. His expression was filled with pride, as if he was waiting for everyone to worship him. Brother Li, you are really amazing. I'm impressed, someone immediately said. It's all thanks to Brother Li that we were able to pass this time. Brother Li, I owe you a favor. As expected, a considerable number expressed their stand, but there was also a minority that did not make a sound. Humph! A bunch of ingrates, Li Shuangyi declared in displeasure, but did not get angry. Instead, he said slowly, the game of Go is ever-changing, and even if you guys follow my path, there would still be changes. With your trashy chess skills, isn't that just courting death? When everyone heard this, they all felt a chill in their hearts. That's right, especially at the beginning where there were too many changes. Even if it was the same move, it was impossible that the opposite side would react exactly the same. With this thought, everyone's attitude changed. They all expressed goodwill towards Li Shuangyi, hoping that when such a situation really appeared, he would be able to give them some guidance. Li Shuangyi smiled faintly. However, he thought to himself, I don't mind letting people who aren't competitive pass the test and reaping some reputation and favors. However, if you make me feel threatened, then I'm sorry. It would be best that you die. It wasn't long before someone entered the board for a game of Go. Sure enough, even though he had followed Li Shuangyi's lead, there was still a slight change. It was all thanks to Li Shuangyi's guidance that he managed to draw the game back to its original course, helping that person achieve victory. This was clearly a mistake, so why could the people beside him give him pointers? Ling Han thought for a moment, then shook his head. Looking at the layout and arrangements of this trial ground, there shouldn't have been such an obvious mistake, but it should have been deliberate. Just like the garden from before. After the first person passed through, all the flowers stopped blooming, allowing people to easily pass through. Those who had passed were naturally very grateful to Li Shuangyi, and Li Shuangyi put on airs, completely ignoring them. Next, another person took the field for a game of Go. After the game changed, Li Shuangyi still offered some guidance, helping the other pass. 2, 3, 4, more and more people passed, but on the 9th an accident happened. The formation spirit's chess skills seemed to have improved greatly, and no matter how hard Li Shuangyi tried, it was useless. Naturally, this person's only fate would be to be crushed by a chess piece. Li Shuangyi immediately sighed. He had made a mistake, and in a game of Go, a mistake would result in a complete loss. Young Master Li, don't take it to heart. People will make mistakes eventually. That's right, that's the logic. Young Master Li, don't think that this is your fault. Everyone comforted him and spoke up for Li Shuangyi. Although that was what they said, no one immediately stepped forward to issue another challenge. Who knew if Li Shuangyi would make another mistake? However, their yearning for abilities ultimately surpassed their fear. Not long after, another person finally stepped forward to issue a challenge. In the end, he won. Everyone regained their confidence and began to scramble to take the field again, because who knew if Li Shuangyi would suddenly leave? Ling Han observed, but it was not that the change in the chessboard, but rather a change in the circulation of the formation. He had gathered a great deal of information, and there was one very important detail, and that was after every move, both sides would only have a minute to consider. If it was too late, the result would be a direct loss. Previously, there were some that had considered for too long, and were directly crushed to death. Ling Han felt that it was unrealistic for him to resolve the formation in a short amount of time, but if he only had to block the channeling of the formation so that it could not move within a minute, he was still capable of doing so. Of course, he still had to accept the challenge first. There were some changes that he had to personally experience. Thus, after the person who was currently playing the game won, Ling Han took the lead and stepped into the position of general. Hey, hey, hey! Why aren't you going down according to young Master Li's arrangements? Someone immediately shouted. Previously, Li Shuangyi had even arranged the order of who would be taking the field, and used this to establish his authority. Everyone needed his help, so naturally, they could only obey his arrangements. How dare you? You actually dare to disobey young Master Li's command? Those who had not passed all spoke up at once, all of them very defiant. Meanwhile, Li Shuangyi smiled proudly. Don't worry, I will not give him any guidance. Haha, then this brat is done for. His only fate is death. Hee hee, for the sake of getting the first turn, you have to sacrifice your life. How foolish. He deserved it. Who asked him to disobey young Master Li's command? Even if he died, he deserved it. Everyone roared with laughter. This unruly person most likely wouldn't live for long. He would soon die on the chessboard. Ling Han ignored them, and the game of Go had already begun. He had not considered winning the game at all. Thus, he was very careless in his moves, and it could be said that every move he made was a mistake. You're actually not going to play by young Master Li's rules? Sigh, even if I'm not skilled in chess, I can tell that this is completely playing blindly. He actually dares to come up with such terrible chess skills? Is your brain muddled from the heat? Everyone shook their heads. This brat was really muddle-headed and too stupid. Ling Han walked around randomly, and the pieces were continuously taken, while the other party practically did not lose any pieces. Li Shuangyi smirked coldly. This time, even if he personally took the field, it was still impossible for him to win the chess game. What a reckless guy. He'll definitely die within the next 3 moves, someone said with certainty. 1 move. 2 moves. Right at this moment, Ling Han suddenly moved. He threw out the destructive formation. Then, he issued a command and casually made a move. Originally, there should have been a general on the other side, but the destructive formation had been thrown just right, cutting off the channeling of the formation. Instantly, it was as if the formation had died, and was no longer channeling. What's going on? He clearly only has to make 1 more chess move, and he would be killed. Even I can close my eyes and play this move. So why is there no reaction from the formation spirit? What is the meaning of this? Is this public cheating? 30 seconds, 50 seconds, 1 minute, and it was automatically a loss. Fuck, what the hell? Why aren't the pieces moving? It's clear that just 1 move would be able to kill him. This is so unfair. Everyone shouted loudly, filled with confusion and displeasure. The general on the other side, the light figure, suddenly walked towards Ling Han. When it arrived in front of Ling Han, it stopped, nodded, and said, "Though there are innumerable people who have passed here, but thinking of using formations to break out of the situation, you are the 9th. This is your reward for your courage and uniqueness." The shadowy figure handed him something. Ling Han accepted it and looked at it. This was actually a chess piece, but it was very small. It was about the size of a normal chess piece, and there was the word elephant written on it. As a memento, when you encounter danger, there is no harm in throwing out a chess piece. There will be pleasant surprises, the shadowy figure said. Then, with a flash, he disappeared. Only now did everyone know that it was not Ling Han that had cheated, or that the formation had taken special care of him, but rather that Ling Han had made use of the time limit of the game between moves, and used the formation to forcefully break out of the situation. Something like that was possible? An elite of formations. They all looked at Ling Han. This seemed to be even more awesome. You see, Li Shuangyi would occasionally make mistakes, but Ling Han only had to throw out a few formation foundations, and he would be able to solve the problem. In comparison, it was obviously Ling Han that was more reliable. "Brother, how about helping me pass the test? I can give you jade seeds. If you want an ancient treasured tome, that's fine too." Quite a number of people immediately called out. Ling Han smiled faintly. He had no shortage of jade seeds, and what kind of treasured book could these people take out that could compare to Brother Monkey cultivation technique? Could it compare to the divine art on the stone wall? "Sorry, I'm in a rush." He strode off. "Wait!" When he passed by Li Shuangyi, the latter suddenly stretched out a hand and stopped Ling Han. "What can I do for you?" Ling Han asked. "You actually dare to publicly embarrass me. You are really brave," Li Shuangyi declared coldly, a coldness flickering in his eyes. "A mere extreme bone tier. I can crush you with a single finger." Ling Han sighed. He was an extreme bone tier, and it seemed like this had also become the point of attracting animosity. Was it really necessary? "What business is it of yours if I cultivate slowly? You speak so much nonsense. You want a fight." Ling Han looked at him disdainfully. To kill a piece of trash like you? Is there any need for me to do it myself?" Li Shuangyi asked calmly, then looked towards the people behind him. "You all owe me a favor. Now, whoever can kill this brat would be considered to have repaid this favor." Instantly, everyone was excited. Killing a minor character in the extreme bone tier was naturally effortless, but they could repay a favor, so everyone were naturally scrambling over one another for the first shot. All of a sudden, 5 people actually charged out at the same time. Immediately, Ling Han received a notification in his mind. Should he lower the others' cultivation level? Should he isolate them? Reduce to inscription tier, and let them attack together? Ling Han stepped forwards. He had just charged up to 4th extreme and hadn't tested out how much his abilities had improved, so these 5 people would be his sparring partners. Pong! 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 Ling Han channeled his power with all his might. However, he didn't use the demonic monkey fists or the murderous aura to attack them. Even so, he was still completely on the upper hand, completely suppressing the 5 people. He had advanced another minor level, and his battle prowess still hadn't reached the enlightenment tier. However, he was more and more invincible among inscription tiers. Fuck! What kind of monster is this? Everyone was watching dumbfounded. When the battle began, everyone could see clearly that the 5 people were all suppressed to the level of inscription tier, but 5 inscription tier elites against 1 extreme bone tier, they were actually suppressed. Just how inconceivable was this? Their scalps all went numb. How could there be such a freakish guy? Even Xianxia felt a chill run down his back. Though he was very talented, he was invincible among his peers, at most. He could not even battle with a disadvantage of a major tier, what more to be invincible like Ling Han with a disadvantage of a major tier. And it just so happened that if they battled here, the cultivation level of elites would be decreased. Then, the higher one's talent in martial arts, the more one would be able to stand out from the rest. Thankfully, if the weak actively provoked, the strong would not have their cultivation level suppressed. When he thought of this, Xianxia breathed a sigh of relief. At least, he did not have to worry that his life would be in danger. Pung pung pung. The 5 inscription tier elites were unable to stop Ling Han, and they were quickly defeated by him. These people were only lackeys, and Ling Han didn't kill them. Instead, he glared at Xianxia, his killing intent cold. Xianxia, however, began to applaud and said, "If I say you're the strongest extreme bone tier elite, there is no doubt about it. However, your cultivation level is really too low. When you leave the mystery realm, I'll kill you at the first instant." Ling Han shook his head and said, "I don't know you at all, and I didn't offend you either. However, you've suffered a blow because of your superiority complex, so you want to kill me? Hey, you're truly despicable. Sorry, I can't find any suitable words to describe you at this moment. I can only say that you're despicable." Despicable? Xianxia was instantly enraged. He clenched his fists tightly, yet said, "Are you trying to provoke me into making a move? Don't waste your effort. I won't fall for it." Ling Han retrieved the heavenly pattern jade and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I won't waste any time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He suddenly activated absolute fairness, and then threw the heavenly pattern jade. With spiritual power, it instantly reached 9 times the speed of sound. This was a super deadly weapon. Pooh! Xianxia didn't even have the chance to react before the heavenly pattern jade smashed into his chest. Under the massive impact and tearing, his whole person exploded, turning into a shower of blood and shattered bones. "I told you you were despicable, yet you didn't believe me," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He walked over and picked up the heavenly pattern jade. This was truly a treasure, without a single trace of blood on it. "I've never seen someone so suicidal." He turned around and saw that everyone was still in a state of numbness. All of them were gaping widely, disbelief written all over their faces. An elite of enlightenment tier was actually directly smashed to death with a rock? This was natural. Compared to Tong Miao and Dong Qi, Xianxia's strength was much weaker. Even Tong Miao and Dong Qi were heavily injured, so wouldn't this guy be smashed to death with a single strike? Ling Han smiled and strode off. He had already drawn the babies into his gourd in advance, so there was naturally nothing to detain him. Those that had similarly passed did not dare to walk alongside him at all. This was too terrifying. He was practically like a god of death, a demon king. Who exactly is this person? I know him. His name is Ling Han, and he's the Ling Han from the twin prodigies of the Imperial City. What? This is only a native? This time, no one dares to underestimate him anymore. Indeed, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, who would be a match for him? With such competitors, it is absolutely impossible to become the young dragon. Forget it. Let's go out. They walked up the craggy mountain path and soon arrived at the summit. However, there was a flight of steps at the summit, and at the top of the steps was a massive throne. Obviously, the true summit should be that throne. Whoever could ascend this peak would be the representative of this peak. Ling Han had the Calabash brothers come out, and the babies were not interested in ascending the peak and sat at the sidelines. At present, they did not need any great opportunities. As long as they could grow normally, they would be able to become elites of celestial path. Even if they were given celestial pills, it would not be of much significance. Ling Han began to ascend the mountain. After taking a step, Wang, light and shadow instantly appeared ahead of him, turning into a human figure that was flickering with golden light. He shot out a punch at him. Pong! Ling Han raised a fist to parry, yet was directly sent flying by this punch. What great power! Ling Han stood still, and the golden figure on the steps also slowly disappeared without a trace. He once again ascended the steps, and the golden figure appeared once more. It had still thrown a punch at him. Ling Han didn't plan to face this attack head-on. Instead, he charged toward the throne at the top. As long as he sat down, perhaps everything would be settled, so what was the point of wasting time? However, he had not rushed up a few steps when another golden figure appeared and shot out a heavy punch at him. Ling Han couldn't dodge this punch. Pung! He immediately rolled down the steps. Thankfully, the two golden figures did not pursue him. Instead, they slowly disappeared. Hiss! Ling Han gritted his teeth and slowly got to his feet. This punch had really caused him a lot of pain, and even his bones had broken. He was now an extreme bone tier elite and had undergone 4 bone changes. His bones should be incredibly tough, yet they were broken with a single strike, which showed how terrifying the destructive power of the golden figure was. You dare to hit our father? Eldest baby was furious. Let's go! The 7 toddlers charged forward, and golden figures immediately appeared. Furthermore, there just happened to be 7 of them, and a battle royale immediately began. The Calabash brothers all showed their mystical power. Some had boundless strength, some were aiming straight for weak points, some were spitting fire, some were spitting water, some were impervious to weapons, some absorbed all attacks and reflected them completely. It wasn't long before the 7 toddlers achieved victory in the first round, destroying the golden figures. However, before they could take more than a few steps, new golden figures appeared, continuing to snipe them. The babies were very awesome, but they had only defeated 3 waves of golden figures before they were blasted down from the steps. Thankfully, they were clever enough and did not suffer any injuries. Damn it! This is too unfair. Second baby cried out loudly. Our battle prowess is only equivalent to the peak stage of the Enlightenment tier, but afterwards, figures with battle prowess of Enlightenment tier actually popped out. We're no match. Hung. We'll grow up a bit more, and we'll definitely win, 7th baby said, hands on her hips. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, You guys are already awesome enough. Take a rest first. As he recovered, he kept looking at the top of the steps. Obviously, the enemies that appeared here would become more and more powerful the higher they went. This should also be based on cultivation level, but at first it was very powerful and then became more and more powerful. It had even leaped up to the battle prowess of Enlightenment tier. Ling Han thought for a moment. The first light figure he encountered should have the power of the 4th level of Inscription tier, and was indeed superior to him. If he didn't use a secret technique, he would naturally be outmatched in a head-on clash, and if it was the second light figure, this power should be 5 inscriptions. The problem was that the second human figure was only 1/4 of the way up the stairs. In other words, even more powerful golden figures would appear and snipe him. With his current cultivation level, it seemed like he would not be able to win. He would give it a try first. Ling Han didn't wait for his bone injuries to recover. Injured tendons and broken bones would take 100 days to recover, and even if he had spiritual herbs, it would take at least 10 days to heal completely. He could temporarily use his mystical power to stabilize his broken bones, and it would not affect his battle prowess too much. Ling Han ascended the steps and began his challenge. Wang, the golden figure, appeared again. Ling Han threw a punch. This time, he used the demonic monkey fists and his might sword. Pong, pong, pong. With a series of attacks, the golden figure exploded. How could a mere inscription tier cultivator be a match for Ling Han? He continued ascending the stairs, and after taking a few steps, a second golden figure appeared. 5 inscriptions. Ling Han was still unafraid. Previously, he had been wounded with a single punch from the other, and it was only because he had been struck suddenly. He also replied with a punch of his own. With the support of the demonic monkey fists, his battle prowess far surpassed 5 inscriptions. After a few punches, the second golden figure was also shattered. He continued forward, and when he was about halfway up the stairs, a third golden figure appeared. This time, the golden figure's battle prowess was even stronger, but it still hadn't reached the extent of enlightenment tier. 6 inscriptions? Ling Han's fighting spirit blazed. He circled around and fought for a while, then used frequency attack, clashing head-on with this human figure. This kind of direct confrontation was the easiest to decide the victor. As expected, in just a few hundred punches, Ling Han once again achieved victory. Judging from the distance, there should be 2 golden figures that would come to snipe him. Ling Han walked a few more steps, and sure enough, a 4th golden figure appeared. This golden figure did not use fists again. Instead, he brandished a golden spear and stabbed it towards Ling Han. Ling Han drew out the battle hammer. It was instantly activated and greeted the incoming attack of the spear. Pong! Amidst a heavy blow, lightning and golden light flashed madly. Ling Han only felt a sharp pain in the web between his thumb and forefinger, and the battle hammer almost slipped out of his grip. He retreated continuously, directly retreating down the steps to the bottom. He bared his teeth and raised his hand. The web between his thumb and forefinger had already split open, and was presently bleeding. This shadowy figure was definitely an enlightenment tier elite. Ling Han was very strong, and very freakish, but he did not possess the strength to battle against power that was superior to him by 2 major tiers. Absolute fairness? Fine, let's give it a try. Ling Han suddenly realized that if they were at the same cultivation level, he wouldn't need as long as 10 minutes to kill 2 opponents. He charged forward again. The 3 light figures from before were naturally dealt with quickly, and when the 4th light figure appeared, he immediately activated absolute fairness. However, the shadowy figure's spear was still incredibly powerful as it pierced over, and its might was not reduced in the slightest. Pong! Ling Han was sent flying again. The wound on the web between his thumb and forefinger immediately split open, and blood gushed out. Fuck, this shadowy figure still had the battle prowess of an enlightenment tier elite, and was not suppressed at all. Absolute fairness was actually ineffective against it. True, the formations here were obviously of a higher level than high level, so it was too easy for absolute fairness to lose effect. Though he had figured it out, the problem was, how was he supposed to deal with it? He was only at the 4th extreme, and Edo match an enlightenment tier elite, perhaps even a 6th extreme wouldn't be able to. He would either have to break through to inscription tier, or take 1 step further, break through the limits, and advance into the 7th extreme that might not even exist. Otherwise, there was absolutely no way he could match enlightenment tier elites. Furthermore, this was only the 4th light figure. There should be a 5th light figure whose abilities were stronger. They had already come so far, so Ling Han naturally couldn't give up. Fine then, he would just cultivate here and attempt to break through to the 7th extreme. He began to cultivate. Several days later, he heard footsteps. A second person had arrived here. Ling Han turned his head and saw that it was a beautiful and enchanting figure. Xianxia. Had she unearthed the secret of the mural, or had she given up helplessly? Ling Han felt that the latter possibility was higher, because the secret of the mural needed an eye technique, and the possibility that Xianxia possessed an eye technique was practically 0. Xianxia naturally saw Ling Han as well. She nodded at him, appearing very friendly. In truth, she very much wanted to capture Ling Han and force him to hand over the secret of the mural. That was because she had indeed left without deciphering the secret within because she was in a rush. However, if the higher cultivation level cultivators challenged the lower cultivation level cultivators here, their cultivation level would be weakened, and she had personally witnessed Ling Han's ability to battle against those at the same cultivation level. She was definitely no match for him. Hence, it was impossible for her to make things difficult for Ling Han here, but the problem was, if she left this place and obtained the secret of the painting, it was highly possible that she would be killed by the great forces behind this place of trial. Under such considerations, she had to develop a good relationship with Ling Han, so good that the latter was willing to tell her the secret of the painting. This could be traded through treasures, cultivation techniques, and even in fact, she was willing to sell off some of her charms. Ling Han also nodded and said, "Miss Xan, Brother Ling is indeed powerful. You're the first to arrive here," Xan Ruyue said. Her eyes swept over the 7 toddlers, and her expression was slightly awkward. She had never seen anyone bring children with them when they ventured into an ancient site. Ling Han smiled faintly. He was still recovering from his injuries, and did not have much interest in socializing with others. With a circulation of mystical power, the recovery of his bone injuries would be slightly faster. With continuous nourishment, he should be able to shorten the recovery time to within 5 days. "Brother Ling, why don't we have a competition to see who can reach the summit?" Xian Ruyue asked, her beautiful eyes burning. Aside from the methods that she had previously considered, she could also make a wager with Ling Han. Young people, after all, would definitely have soaring pride. Ling Han smiled faintly. "What are we betting on? I have a cultivation technique here called 3-Yang Heaven Replenishing Technique. After being injured, channeling this cultivation technique would have great effects," Xian Ruyue said. "It is said that after cultivating it to the extreme, severed limbs can be regrew. As long as the vital points are not damaged, they can be recovered." Ling Han's eyes involuntarily lit up. Although he could modify the indestructible heaven scroll, it was still limited by his cultivation level. The limitations were far too great. It was inevitable that cultivators would be injured. With this cultivation technique, it was equivalent to having an additional safeguard. In fact, this might even grant them an additional life. "What do you want from me, Miss Xian?" Ling Han asked with a smile. The fact that she had taken out such a cultivation technique had completely piqued his interest, so she must be scheming something. Xian Ruyue smiled beautifully. "Ruyue wants the cultivation technique that Brother Ling obtained from the painting." Ling Han was surprised. "Wasn't it said that this could not be taught to outsiders, as they would be hunted down?" Xian Ruyue nodded. "That is indeed the case. However, in terms of teaching here, Ruyue can claim to have comprehended it on her own." Ling Han looked at his wrist. After he had comprehended this cultivation technique, there was an additional mark on it, which disappeared with a flash. At first, he had thought that it would not appear again, but when he channeled that cultivation technique, it appeared again. Could it be that this was not because of the cultivation technique itself, but rather because he had learnt it here, and that was why he was given a stamp, so that it would be effective as proof in future? Otherwise, how could that force judge whether he had learnt it here, or had been taught it by someone else? Thoughts flashed in Ling Han's mind. With his cultivation level, it was naturally impossible for him to forcefully snatch the cultivation technique from the other's hands. In this place, even absolute fairness was ineffective. Moreover, the other party had not trifled with him either. Just because the other party had something that he wanted, to move and snatch it by force, what difference would there be between him and those profligate young masters? The reason why he had become strong was so that he would not be bullied, and not so that he could bully the weak. "All right, I'll take that bet." Ling Han nodded. A smile appeared on Xian Ryue's face. She dared to gamble with Ling Han, so it was naturally impossible that she wasn't confident. She began to ascend the steps, and immediately, the shadowy figure appeared. She was an Enlightenment tier elite, so the shadowy figure naturally couldn't be an Inscription tier elite, even if this was only her first opponent. They began a fierce battle. In terms of power, it should be the light figure that was stronger, but Xian Ruyue avoided a head-on clash, and did not confront her opponent head-on all this while. The 2 whips in her hands danced in the air, and very soon, she had the upper hand, and defeated her opponent. Xian Ruyue wielded her twin whips and continued forward. After taking a few steps, a second shadowy figure appeared. Its strength was obviously much stronger, but it still hadn't leaped out of the range of Enlightenment tier. Thus, Xian Ruyue still easily dealt with it with a burst of power from a burst of attacks. She once again advanced, and when the third shadowy figure appeared, both sides had fought to a tie. This shadowy figure's strength still hadn't broken through to Mystery Realm tier. However, its battle prowess was comparable to 6th Extreme, and it was incredibly powerful. After battling for a long time, Xianxia's mystical power was exhausted, and she had no choice but to step down. Xianxia's expression was slightly ugly. Before she came, she had done a great deal of research, and thought that she had already understood everything clearly. She was very well prepared, and had also arrived at the last stage. However, even with her full effort, she was only able to walk halfway up the steps. She did indeed have some tricks up her sleeve. It would not be difficult for her to defeat her third opponent. The problem was, there should be 2 more opponents after this, so how was she going to defeat them? She wasn't worried about the bet yet, and it was even more impossible for Ling Han to win. However, if she couldn't reach the peak, she similarly wouldn't be able to become a candidate for Young Dragon. Nor would she be able to obtain Ling Han's cultivation technique. This naturally made her unhappy. She could only wait. She was very clear about the rules here. The earlier the light figures that appeared on these steps, the stronger their abilities would be, but if no one managed to reach the summit after a long time, the strength of the light figures would slowly weaken by themselves, right until there was someone that could reach the summit. Hence, she could only wait now. When she could defeat her 4th opponent, she would then use a forbidden technique, defeating her 5th opponent, and pass in a single stroke. Ling Han found this strange. Why was it that his opponent had already possessed an advantage of a major cultivation level from the very beginning, yet Xianxia's opponent was so weak? Could it be that his cultivation level was too weak? Because his cultivation level was too low, just how many losses had he suffered? Thus, cultivate in peace and reach 7th Extreme as soon as possible. If possible, then advance into the inscription tier. Ling Han first healed his injuries, and when the sun rose on the 2nd day, he began to cultivate. A day passed, and finally, another person had rushed here, but this person was even worse. He had not even managed to defeat the first shadowy figure. He wanted to leave, yet was unwilling to do so, so he too waited at the sidelines. Ling Han found this strange. What's the point of waiting like this? Could it be that he'll become stronger, or will the opponent's strength become weaker? Very soon, he shockingly discovered that the strength of the light person would really be weakened. On the 3rd day, Xianxia defeated the 3rd shadowy figure, though she was defeated after exchanging a single blow with the 4th shadowy figure. That was already the battle prowess of Mystery Realm tier, and was not something that she could match at all. There was actually something like that. Thankfully, the weakening of the light person's abilities was very small. In other words, if Xianxia was really allowed to pass through safely, this would still need a very long time. Ling Han also stepped forward to exchange a few blows. Sure enough, his opponent was also slightly weaker than before. He continued to cultivate. After 5 days, as expected, all the injuries on his bones and hands had healed completely, and his cultivation level had more or less reached the peak stage of the 4th Extreme. At most, in 1 or 2 days, he would be able to break through to the 5th Extreme. He was a little anxious because the strength of the light person was getting weaker and weaker by the day. Though it was only a little weaker every day, who knew how many more days it would take for Xianxia to break through? This woman appeared to be very confident, which also made Ling Han believe that she had a rare treasure in her possession. It was very likely that she would use it after knocking out the 4th shadowy light figure, and charge up to the throne in one go. Hence, this 4th light figure was the safety line. Once it was defeated, Xianxia would probably be able to do as she liked. There was not much time left. More and more people came, but there was not a single one that could match Xianxia. If they wanted to pass, they would have to wait for the formation to weaken the battle prowess of the light figure by who knew how many times. Another 2 days passed, and Ling Han quietly retreated back into the forest from before. He found a very secluded place and began to break through to the 5th Extreme. For him, as long as there were treasured fruits of life, everything would naturally fall into place. To be on the safe side, he also set up a large-scale absolute fairness. The 7 Calabash brothers were responsible for guarding it. In this way, even if an elite and prodigy like Xianxia came, they would not be able to get past the babies. Pa pa pa. The shackles in his body were broken one after another, and layer after layer of bone scraps fell off, causing him to grit his teeth and groan. This was really too painful. 3 hours later, Ling Han completed the great leap in level of being. He couldn't help but mull over this. He had torn apart more shackles than most people when they were breaking through, but even so, it seemed like there were still countless shackles in his body. Just how many restrictions had the heavens placed on these mortal bodies of theirs? Father, why is an innate divine physique so powerful? Second baby seemed to be able to see through to the thought in Ling Han's heart and said, in fact, an innate divine physique is able to suppress mortals under celestial path, but after advancing into the celestial path, the suppression will become even greater. Why? That's because there isn't a sliver of heaven and earth shackling the body of a divine physique possessor. Moreover, no matter how mortals break through their shackling, they can't attain endless perfection. Thus, once they advance into the celestial path, these shackles will chain mortals, causing the gulf between them and the divine physique possessor to become larger and larger. Ling Han nodded and asked, how many shackles does that person have in total? It varies from person to person. Eldest baby spoke up first. Even if it's not an innate divine physique, there is still bloodline lineage, and the stronger the bloodline lineage, the fewer the shackles in the body, and tearing open one would be equivalent to 10 of others. That's right. Fourth baby nodded. Fifth baby continued. However, I've heard of a kind of divine physique called the heaven-hatred physique. When it was born, not only did it have shackles, but there were also shockingly many shackles, as if they could not be broken through no matter what. It was as if the heavens bore a grudge against it. Ah, I've also heard of it. Sixth baby clapped her hands, and only the applause could be heard, but the appearance of clapping could not be seen. Actually, the heavenly vengeance physique was originally called chaos physique. The inheritance originates from the primitive age, and there are pitifully few of them. However, if a chaos physique really breaks through all the shackles in the body, then that would be the highest grade of innate divine physique. Ling Han rubbed his head. Could it be that he possessed the heavenly vengeance physique? Coming from the divine stone, no matter what, he shouldn't have a mortal body. Ling Han stabilized his cultivation level, and couldn't be bothered to ascend either. He simply tested his strength in the forest. There was a great improvement in all aspects, but in terms of defeating Enlightenment tier, he was still a bit off. By the looks of it, only after advancing into the 7th extreme would he be able to stand against an Enlightenment tier elite. Otherwise, even 6th extreme would be hard-pressed. His cultivation speed was already fast enough with the help of the cultivation technique on the stone wall, but Ling Han still found it slow, because the weakening of strength for the light figure wouldn't wait for him, becoming weaker and weaker with each passing day. Who knew if Xianxia would beat him to it one day? After a few more days, Ling Han suddenly saw golden light flicker on the distant peak. Then he saw a massive throne rise into the air. There's a person sitting on it? Second baby said after activating her eye technique. Ling Han nodded. By the looks of it, the first young dragon candidate had already emerged victorious. Another 2 days passed, and the second candidate for the position of young dragon appeared. 3 days later, a throne flew up from the 3rd peak. Ling Han had also reached the peak stage of the 5th extreme, and possessed the qualifications to attempt breaking through to the 6th extreme. For him, the limit was equivalent to an ordinary 4th extreme cultivator attempting to break through to 5th extreme. It would be slightly troublesome, but it could not be considered too much trouble. After a day of accumulation, he charged up to 6th extreme. Breaking through his limits, his battle prowess soared, and the boost brought by this kind of breakthrough was extremely great. Ling Han felt that his current strength was enough to battle against those in the early stage of Enlightenment tier. Enlightenment tier was a continuous process, so it did not matter how many levels there were. It was divided into early stage, middle stage, late stage, and consummate stage. After stabilizing his cultivation level, he arrived at the summit. At this time, Xianxia was currently engaged in an intense battle with the 4th shadowy figure. After fighting for 100 moves, she was outmatched and retreated. The situation was very dire. Previously, she could not even withstand a single move, yet now, she could fight 100 moves fiercely. Then, after a few more days, she may be able to fight it to a tie, and then emerge victorious. At that time, she could use her secret weapon, and it should not be too difficult for her to crush the 5th shadowy figure. Brother Ling. Xian Ruiyue didn't suffer any injuries. She smiled at Ling Han and said confidently, "Looks like Ruiyue is about to win this bet. If Miss Xian really wins, I will definitely hand over my cultivation technique," Ling Han said calmly. Brother Ling is truly trustworthy, Xian Ruiyue flattered. Ling Han naturally wouldn't take it to heart. The outcome of the battle was yet to be decided, so it was still too early for her to celebrate. He began to ascend the stairs. The first, second, and third light figures appeared one after another, and they were all easily defeated by Ling Han. Now that his cultivation level had improved greatly, and the strength of the light person had been greatly weakened, it naturally could not withstand a single blow. A fourth shadowy figure appeared. Ling Han clenched a fist and shot out a punch. The shadowy figure immediately struck with the divine spear. Pong! The fist and the spear clashed. Ling Han only felt a pain in his fist, but did not take the slightest step back. As time passed, he had already surpassed the fourth shadowy figure in terms of battle prowess. Ling Han estimated that the light person's strength had dropped out of the enlightenment tier, but it was comparable to the sixth level of the inscription tier. He humphed lightly and brandished his fists repeatedly, incredibly violent. In just over 100 moves, he had completely destroyed this shadowy figure. In the first place, he was already capable of defeating all battle prowess in inscription tier, what more now that he had advanced into 6th extreme. Seeing Ling Han win, Xian Ruiyue's pretty face involuntarily paled. Xian Ruiyue judged others with herself as a standard. She possessed a forbidden technique that could allow her battle prowess to explode. Thus, she was confident that after defeating the fourth shadowy figure, she would be able to defeat the fifth obstacle in a single stroke. Since she had such means, why did Ling Han not? Hence, she was extremely nervous. However, there was nothing else she could do. As long as he stood on this step, others would not be able to interfere. This had already been tried long ago. Ling Han continued to advance. When he arrived in front of the throne, he saw a fifth shadowy figure appear, blocking in front of him. The shadowy figure solidified, almost taking form. The moment this shadowy figure appeared, it immediately shot out a punch at Ling Han. This punch was astonishingly fast, and he was definitely an enlightenment tier elite. Ling Han replied with a punch of his own, yet retreated continuously. He frowned. At first, he had thought that he was already capable of matching an enlightenment tier elite. At least, it would not be difficult for him to reach the early stage of the enlightenment tier, but once he was facing one, he knew that the 6th extreme was still unable to make up for the gap of 2 major tiers. However, 6th extreme was still 6th extreme after all. He had broken through his limits, causing his battle prowess to increase greatly. No matter what, he would not be so weak that he could not withstand a single blow. Ling Han unleashed all kinds of techniques and battled fiercely with the light person. However, whether it was him using the boiling of blood and QJ or the demonic monkey fists added with frequency attack, or even activating his eye technique to investigate the weaknesses of the light person, even the heavenly pattern jade, he was still unable to gain the upper hand. When the explosion had ended, he had no choice but to step back. He looked at the top of the steps, and thought that there was no need for him to advance into the 7th extreme. He only had to wait a few more days, and when the light figure's strength weakened a bit more, he would be able to win. More importantly, he turned to look at Xian Ruiyue. Unexpectedly, Xian Ruiyue was also looking at him. Though there were many people here, the two of them were the only competitors with each other. It would depend on which of them could get there first. On the surface, Ling Han naturally had the upper hand, and had already reached the 5th stage. However, Xian Ruiyue had a forbidden technique. Once she defeated the 4th shadowy figure, she was confident that she could defeat the 5th opponent with a single strike. Thus, the two of them were already standing on the last step. The strength of the light person was declining, and it would depend on whose limit would be broken through first. Ling Han retracted his gaze, his expression calm. He was not a sore loser. Furthermore, he felt that his chances of winning were higher, because Xian Ruiyue's strength could not possibly improve much in a short period of time. But he could. 2 days passed, and one after another, thrones rose from the various peaks. Very soon, the 8 peaks had gathered, and only their peak had not produced any young dragon candidates yet. Ling Han and Xian Ruyue were both repeatedly issuing challenges, and they were getting closer and closer to victory. It was really hard to say who would have the last laugh. The others had already lost hope, but they didn't leave. Instead, they continued to watch the battle, wanting to know who would have the last laugh between Ling Han and Xian Ruyue. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Ling Han was about to reach the peak stage of 6th extreme, and after this morning's cultivation ended, he had full confidence that he could defeat his opponent. He rushed up the steps and began a fierce battle. Unexpectedly, Xian Ruyue also rushed up, looking determined to win. Pong! 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 In order to save time, they used powerful moves right off the bat. Ling Han used a battle hammer, while Xian Ruyue brandished her twin whips. One after another, seals lit up, and the 2 whips turned into light and shadow. With a single whip strike, the elite was reduced to ashes. However, it was still Ling Han who was faster. He had killed the first light figure first, but Xian Ruyue was only slightly behind. It was practically a gap of 1 to 2 seconds, and she had also killed her first opponent. Wang, a second opponent, appeared. Fight, fight, fight. They were still completely unstoppable. It was still Ling Han who was faster, and had increased his advantage of being in the lead by about 4 seconds. Then it was the third opponent. This gap was even more obvious. Ling Han soon won, while Xian Ruyue was still battling fiercely. In fact, when Ling Han had killed his fourth opponent, Xian Ruyue had just barely defeated her third opponent. Ling Han faced off against the fifth shadowy figure, while Xian Ruyue engaged in an intense battle with the fourth shadowy figure. This was much more dragged out. Even if Ling Han already had absolute confidence that he could win, being able to win and the number of moves it would take him were 2 different matters. Most importantly, the shadowy figure was completely immune to the murderous aura barrage. Otherwise, it would not have been so difficult for Ling Han to win. About half an hour later, Ling Han had the absolute upper hand, and his victory was only a few moves away. At this time, Xian Ruyue was also about to win. Pong! Ling Han sent his opponent flying, and on the other side, Xian Ruyue also killed the fourth light figure with her twin whips. She charged forward without hesitation, biting down with her beautiful teeth. The alchemical pill that she had placed in her mouth immediately shattered. The medicinal effects were instantaneous, and her entire body glowed with blood. All of a sudden, her strength had increased by at least 3 times, no, even 5 times. This was one of her forbidden techniques. She could unleash 5 times her original strength, but this was only limited to a single strike. After this strike, not only would her battle prowess drop, she would only be 1/10 of what she would be in her normal state. Pong! Sure enough, the fifth shadowy figure was no match for her at all. She sent the shadowy figure flying with a single strike of her whip, but her battle prowess also dropped drastically. Xiao! Xiao! The 2 of them scrambled towards the throne. Xian Ruyue's beautiful eyes turned cold. She was 1 position behind Ling Han, and if she did not take any action, the victor of this peak would be Ling Han. No! She waved her hands without hesitation, and the 2 whips shot towards Ling Han. Fuck, so much of a sore loser? Ling Han humphed coldly, and replied with a punch of his own. His fist crashed into the whip, instantly creating a powerful shockwave of power. The air was completely torn apart, and even light was distorted. Xian Ruyue stumbled back continuously, directly retreating down the steps. Meanwhile, though Ling Han's figure was also swaying, he fell back onto the throne and sat down solidly. Xian Ruyue had miscalculated. After using the forbidden technique, her battle prowess had dropped to 1/10, and she was actually unable to suppress Ling Han. Otherwise, she was confident that she could send Ling Han flying. Ling Han sat down, and the throne immediately lit up, releasing an incredibly powerful aura as it slowly rose into the air. Xian Ruyue flopped onto the ground, appearing extremely disheveled. She definitely couldn't accept this result. Whether it was the candidate for Young Dragon, or the cultivation technique hidden in the mural, both were lost to her. She gripped her twin whips tightly. If looks could kill, Ling Han would have already died many times over. Ling Han looked down at this woman coldly and humphed internally. This Xian Ryue was actually not much different from Dong Qi and Tong Miao. It was just that she had concealed herself very well. He very quickly withdrew his gaze. As long as he advanced into 7th extreme, then even if he could not defeat this woman, there would be no problem for him to protect himself. The next time they met, he would ask her for the three-yang heaven replenishing technique. No one was allowed him to owe him any debts. Absolutely not. The throne rose into the air. Xiao, the essence-nurturing gourd on Ling Han's waist, was suddenly pulled down by a mysterious power, falling towards the summit. Ling Han wanted to haul it back, but his body was bound to the throne by a powerful force, so he could only call out, "Eldest baby, take the gourd and descend the peak first." "All right," eldest baby said childishly, running over to catch the gourd. Ling Han didn't need to worry. If anyone wanted to snatch it by force, then in a battle of equals, eldest baby wouldn't lose to anyone. The 9 mountain peaks emitted blazing light at the same time, as if they were creating a world of their own, with boundless brilliance. In the skies, a palace appeared, floating in midair just like that, exuding a boundless aura. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. The previous 8 thrones also flew towards the palace in the skies. The 9 thrones gathered together, and then landed on a massive plaza in front of the palace. It was paved with white jade-like stone, and could practically be considered reflective. Ling Han felt his body relax. Previously, after ascending to the throne, this chair had developed a powerful suction force on him, anchoring him to it. However, losing his freedom for a short while was not a bad thing, because he could sense the astonishing energy that the chair was exuding towards him, improving his physique in all aspects. This was not increasing his cultivation level, but rather improving the essence of his life force, which had many benefits. Unfortunately, when the restraints of the throne on him disappeared, this kind of improvement also disappeared. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head, and he looked towards the other 8 thrones. These people had all sat on them for at least a few days, so how many benefits had they obtained? He stood up and stepped onto the plaza. The other 8 people were the same as well and stood up respectively. Since the benefits were already gone, what meaning was there to continue sitting? Ling Han's eyes swept over and saw 2 familiar faces, Hong Tianbu and Princess Bixiao. The other 6 people were completely unfamiliar to him, and he didn't recognize any of them. The 5th summit is really weak. Someone has only emerged victorious after we have waited for so many days, a man said disdainfully. He had the head of a tiger, and his ferocious might was overwhelming. It allowed you to enjoy the benefits for a few more days? Are you still not satisfied? An incredibly sturdy man asked smilingly, the black and white around his eyes on his bear's head drawing the attention of others. "Hey, there's only a total of 3 days, and there won't be any benefits after that. It's not like you don't know," the tiger-headed person scoffed, his eyes fixed on Ling Han, having a terrifying viciousness. A mere extreme bone tier actually won. Just what kind of trash are those at the 5th peak? No wonder they're so slow. Hu Taifeng, he is Ling Han, another man said. A pair of massive wings sprouted from his back, and his feet were bare. Upon a closer look, those were basically a pair of claws, exuding a coldness like fine iron. Ling Han's eyes turned cold. The demon race had 4 great prodigies, Hu Er, Hu Taifeng, Xiong Bao, and Ing Pokong. Then, corresponding to each of them, this tiger-headed person must be Hu Taifeng, the bear-headed person was Xiong Bao, and the bird-headed person was Ing Pokong. The demon race was indeed powerful. It was not just empty words that they could crush humans below celestial path, and added with Princess Bixiao, they had already occupied at least 4 places. Furthermore, it was said that Hu Er was even stronger, so he definitely would not be squeezed out. He swept an eye over the group of 8. His gaze locked on an indescribably handsome man. This man was so handsome that even women would be envious. If he was dressed in women's clothing, he would definitely be an exceptional beauty. He had a kind of beauty that surpassed gender, and could be considered both handsome and beautiful. Hu Er. Why so sure? That was because he had a pair of furry ears, as well as a tail that stuck out. but this did not affect his charm in the slightest. Hu Er, the top elite of the younger generation of the demon race, a mystery realm tier. Ling Han didn't know who was stronger between himself and Princess Bixiao, but if the two of them were to fight now, it would be a fair battle and he would definitely lose. Even if he had really advanced into 7th extreme, or even stepped onto inscription tier, it was still impossible for him to be a match for a mystery realm tier elite at present. Well, just the demon race alone had taken up 5 spots, and added with him and Hong Tianbu, there were only 2 people whose identities were still unknown. He looked over. The 2 of them were a man and a woman respectively. The man had a slender figure and should be a pure human. He was also very handsome, but with Hu Er there, probably no one would dare call themselves a handsome man. There was also a woman. To say nothing of whether she was beautiful or not. Just her figure alone was enough to scare anyone to death. Strong. She was at least as sturdy as 4 Ling Hans added together. One of her arms was as thick as a normal person's thigh, and there were only 2 pieces of animal hide wrapped around her, revealing a large part of her skin. However, it was obviously impossible to attract anyone's attention. This kind of beauty was still something to be avoided. There was also a spiked club slung behind her back, and her eyes were like copper bells, as if she would strike anyone that she did not like with her spiked club. Have you guys realized that there is an additional mark on your wrist? Ing Pokong did not continue to be conflicted about the issue of Ling Han. That was because, according to rumors, this brat had an unclear relationship with Her Imperial Highness, the princess, and was not someone that they could simply gossip about. That's right. What is this thing? I can't even see it now. Hu Taifeng nodded. Ling Han also lowered his head. Just now, when he was descending from the throne, he had indeed discovered that there was an additional mark on his wrist. It disappeared in a flash, and added with the fact that he had obtained the cultivation technique from the mural, he had already been given 2 stamps. Who cares? Xiong Bao looked at Ling Han, Hong Tianbu, and the other humans. If you ask me, let's kill these 4 humans first. All right, the candidate for young dragon can only belong to us, the demon race. Humans. Step aside. Ing Pokong nodded. Hong Tianbu stood, arms crossed behind his back, and said calmly, "If you want to die, just make your move." These simple words were filled with intimidation. Princess Bixiao waved a hand and said, "We're still unclear about the situation inside. Let's enter the palace first." "Yes, Your Highness." Xiong Bao, Ing Pokong, and Hu Er all nodded. They were very respectful in front of this demon race princess. Even Hu Er bowed slightly to express his respect for Princess Bixiao. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Wu Lidong," the lanky human said. "I am Mei Hua," the sturdy woman said as well. Her voice boomed like thunder, and she even patted her chest, causing waves to ripple. "It must be muscles," Ling Han said with absolute certainty as he mocked. "Have plum blossoms done any offense to you? Why do you have to make things difficult for plum blossoms? If you do this, I'll have a different opinion of plum blossoms in future." "Copyright Ling Han," he replied. Hong Tianbu, meanwhile, was proud, as if it was beneath him to associate with them. "Who is that guy? He looks so conceited." Mei Hua covered her mouth with her hand and asked quietly. However, her voice was only slightly softer than an ordinary person's holler. Hong Tianbu naturally heard it very clearly, and he couldn't help but frown slightly, a sliver of killing intent circulating within him. Ling Han chuckled. "A conceited guy. Ling Han, are you seeking death?" Hong Tianbu asked coldly. Ling Han immediately shouted exaggeratedly and said, "Bixiao dear, someone is trying to murder your husband." Ling Han's words successfully caused the expressions of the 4 members of the demon race and Hong Tianbu to change drastically. Princess Bixiao was naturally angry. "Who's your dear?" Xiong Bao, Ing Pokong and Hu Taifeng were all enraged. They all admired Princess Bixiao very much. Previously, when Princess Bixiao entered into the imperial capital for a political marriage, they were already filled with anger. Thankfully, this was only a temporary measure, and there was no imperial prince that was worthy of her. However, after the scandalous news of Princess Bixiao and Ling Han spread out, they had also thought of killing Ling Han. However, this concerned the princess, so it was not up to them to make decisions. They could only suppress it. But now, Ling Han actually dared to tease Princess Bixiao right in front of them. How could they tolerate this? Even Hong Tianbu's eyes were cold and sinister. At first, he had not taken Princess Bixiao seriously, but after Princess Bixiao burst out with the strength of Mystery Realm Tear, his heart throbbed wildly. This was a woman that was worthy of him. Only Hu Er remained silent. He merely looked at Ling Han's face, and then looked at Princess Bixiao's face, as if he had come to a realization. Ling Han, don't spout nonsense, Princess Bixiao said through gritted teeth. Bixiao darling, could it be that you have forgotten the great oath between us? Ling Han said, pretending to be aggrieved. Who made any kind of oath with you? Princess Bixiao was quite furious. In front of others, she could always maintain a calm and composed demeanor, but when faced with Ling Han, it was very easy for her to lose control. Be bastard, she said angrily. Her appearance was captivating, and even if she was gritting her teeth and cursing, she was still extremely graceful. In the eyes of others, this was actually not much different from acting spoiled. Oh no, their princess had fallen for him. Xiong Bao, Ing Pokong, and Hu Taifeng all shook their heads, their expressions plaintive. Hong Tianbu humphed. Ling Han, you are seeking death. He moved aggressively, grabbing out at Ling Han. When this attack arrived, Ling Han did not receive any hint. In this place, it seemed like he could only battle with his own abilities. The formation would no longer suppress the cultivation level of elites. Use absolute fairness? Shua, a figure flashed, and there was already a person standing in front of Ling Han. He delivered a palm strike towards Hong Tianbu, helping Ling Han dispel this move. Huer, Peng, the two of them exchanged a blow, and both of them took a few steps back. They were actually evenly matched. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. Could it be that Hong Tianbu had advanced into Mystery Realm Tier? Hu Er was known as the #1 prodigy of the demon race, and added with the cultivation level of Mystery Realm Tier, who in the Enlightenment Tier could fight him to a tie. You dare to stop me? Hong Tianbu asked coldly. Princess Bixiao also rebuked. Hu Er, why did you save him? Hu Er was still calm, as if he would not be moved by anything. He said, if I want to make a move, I will. Who do I have to report to? Fine. Then hand over your life. Hong Tianbu attacked again. However, this time his target was Hu Er. He sent out a palm strike, and an endless primal aura circulated. Vicious might spread out in all directions, as if he had turned into a primitive age monster. Hu Er's figure moved, and began a fierce battle with Hong Tianbu. He was indeed worthy of being the #1 prodigy of the demon race. It looked like a casual move, but its might was endless. He was not at a disadvantage at all in a clash with Hong Tianbu. Ling Han was stunned upon seeing this. Hong Tianbu was really a freak. He was obviously one major tier lower in terms of cultivation level, but his battle prowess was extremely terrifying. Against an elite like Hu Er, he was not at a disadvantage at all. How could he be so strong? That eye of the primordial beast. Ling Han immediately thought. He activated his ocular technique, yet shockingly discovered that he no longer saw the existence of that eye. Hong Tianbu had abandoned it? Impossible. Ling Han shook his head. There was only one possibility, and that was Hong Tianbu had completely fused with this vicious eye. Thus, his battle prowess had soared, and he was still undefeated even in a battle against an opponent who had surpassed him by a major cultivation level. Ling Han could only become invincible after advancing into the 7th change. If he couldn't break through the limit of the extreme bone tier, then after he advanced into the inscription tier, perhaps he could only remain invincible against an opponent that surpassed him by a major tier. In inscription tier, he was still unable to break through the limit, so his battle prowess would drop to the level that he could just barely battle an opponent surpassing him by a major tier. Hong Tianbu was an Enlightenment tier elite, and before this, he definitely hadn't cultivated the 7th change, 7th extreme, 7 inscriptions, and so on. However, he possessed the ability to surpass the cultivation level of a major tier and not be defeated, which proved that the eye of this primordial beast was truly terrifying. However, Ling Han had always believed that relying on external items was definitely not the way to go. Hong Tianbu looked mighty now, but he would definitely have to pay a price for this in future. Hu Er was calm and composed. No matter how many ultimate moves Hong Tianbu used, he would always use the simplest moves to disperse them, appearing to be very much at ease. As for his true strength, it was completely impossible to estimate. Hong Tianbu stopped fighting on his own volition. He naturally still had a powerful trump card that he had yet to use, but it looked like Hu Er was the same as well. Thus, he did not want to continue fighting pointlessly like this. There will ultimately be a battle between us, he stated calmly, meaning that with the 9 of them competing for the position of young dragon, it was inevitable that they would have an ultimate battle. In Hong Tianbu's eyes, only Hu Er was worthy of being his opponent. Hu Er's expression was calm, and he didn't show any sympathy or delight. He was completely expressionless. But there was no need to doubt that even if he was expressionless, he would still be able to capture the hearts of countless women, regardless of age. Let's enter the palace. Princess Bixiao glared harshly at Ling Han. This was all his fault. Ling Han returned a dazzling smile to her. Who asked this princess of the demon race to be trapped in her own trap and insist on creating rumors of an ambiguous relationship between the two of them. They arrived at the doors of the palace and saw that the doors were tightly shut. There were 9 golems at the doors, and they were as tall as 5 people. They looked majestic and had an indescribable pressure. Ling Han stretched out a hand to touch the golem, and instantly, a pile of information was received in his mind. Firstly, if one wanted to enter the palace, they had to enter a golem and use the golem as their armor. Otherwise, with the deathly light shining from the palace, anyone below Celestial Path, even Mystery Realm tier elites, could only die on the spot. Secondly, the basic battle prowess of the golems were all the same, but under the influence of the owner's tier-surpassing battle prowess, the stronger the owner's tier-surpassing battle prowess was, the stronger the golem's battle prowess would be. Whoever could be the first to charge into the depths of the palace would be able to obtain the first place in the Young Dragon trial, receive a reward, and be bestowed the title of Young Dragon. The 9 of them had emerged victorious, and in future, they would all be able to participate in the True Dragon trial, but being able to gain the title of Young Dragon would be considerably beneficial in the True Dragon trial. As for the exact details, they would only know in future. Additionally, it was forbidden to kill each other here, or one would be disqualified. The other 8 people received the information at about the same time, and almost no one hesitated, fusing with the golem one after another. Ha! The golem that Xiangbao had fused with was the first to move. As it ran, it was about to throw a punch at the stone door, but he had just taken a few steps, when he stumbled and fell onto the ground, as if he was an infant that had just learned to walk. From a certain aspect, they were indeed infants. Ling Han also fused into the golem, but he would not immediately enter into the palace. Instead, he had to first break through to 7th extreme. The basic battle prowess of the golems was the same. In other words, whether they were Mystery Realm tier or Extreme Bone tier, there wouldn't be much difference in power after fusing with the golems. The difference lay in their own tier surpassing battle prowess. The higher the value of their strength, the greater the golem's power. Ling Han first had to get used to every move after fusing with the golem. This was called compatibility. It was like a person riding a horse, and if he didn't get a good compatibility with the horse, he would very easily fall off the horse. No matter how fast the horse was, could it run? Moreover, he had not entered into the palace anyways, and there was no death light. Furthermore, he could only cultivate for half an hour a day, so he was completely in no rush. It was unknown what material this golem was made of. When his body touched it, the rock was like water, soft and without force. His whole person sank in. He entered into the golem's interior, and his whole body was wrapped in a layer of soft and extremely elastic matter. His eyes couldn't see anything, but after releasing his divine sense, everything in his surroundings was immediately absorbed into his mind. Ling Han raised his foot, and the golem instantly raised its foot as well. Pong! The ground trembled from the impact, and the golem immediately slanted, almost losing its balance and falling onto the ground. The present him was like an infant learning to walk. However, he was not a real infant after all, so he very quickly adapted to this kind of rhythm and began walking steadily. He tried to throw a punch. Hong! The golem also clenched its fist and threw out a punch, fierce and powerful. But its power wasn't very strong, at most tens of thousands of kilograms. Ling Han tried to channel the demonic monkey fists again, and the golem immediately started to fight crookedly. Though it looked a little similar, it was completely unable to unleash the true might of the demonic monkey fists. He used the lightning fist technique, and it was the same as well. It only had the form but did not have the spirit. There was absolutely no way that he could unleash the speed of the lightning fist technique. Spiritual power didn't work either, and he couldn't communicate with high-level energy. This time, it was equivalent to his strength falling to rock bottom. Whether it was the martial arts techniques, spiritual power, or spirit tool, they were all completely useless. What he needed to develop now was the battle prowess of the golem. To enter the palace, one first had to open the palace doors. Those like Xiong Bao and Hu Taifeng had already pushed open the doors, but the golems were massive and could not allow two people to stand side by side at all. They could only do it one by one. However, no matter how hard the two of them tried, they were still unable to open the stone door. They couldn't even enter, so how could they compete for the first place? Their power was all limited, and they could only use the golem's own abilities. Thus, it wasn't that the golem's power wasn't enough to open the door, but rather that their compatibility with the golem wasn't high enough. Just like how the golem's basic power was 50,000 kilograms, they could only unleash 15,000 or 20,000 kilograms now, so it was naturally not powerful enough. This was very natural. At the beginning, it was difficult for them to even let the golem walk normally, so it was naturally even more difficult to let the golem's power be fully unleashed, and this belonged to the category of advanced abilities. Thus, the 9 of them commanded the golem to continuously kick and punch, increasing their compatibility as soon as possible. At night, they did not sleep either. None of them wanted to waste any time. On the morning of the second day, Ling Han exited the stone golem and started to cultivate. Unexpectedly, he was not the only one. Wu Lidong, Hong Tianbu, and Hu Er were all cultivating in the face of the rising sun. Obviously, none of them had cultivated their current cultivation level to the peak stage, so there was still room for improvement. Ling Han sensed for a while, and discovered that the speed at which Hong Tianbu and Hu Er extracted the power of heaven and earth was frighteningly fast. Obviously, these two people had deciphered the secrets of the mural and obtained the inheritance. Hong Tianbu could do this, probably because he had fused with the eye of a primordial beast so he could see things that normal people couldn't. But what about Hu Er? Could it be that he had also cultivated an eye technique? Ling Han suppressed this doubt in his heart. Half an hour later, he once again entered into the golem and continued to improve his compatibility. Compatibility 50%. In the afternoon, a voice rang out in Ling Han's mind. It was incredibly cold. This was the golem talking to him? It was not very accurate to call it a conversation. It had only transmitted a message to him. As it turned out, he had just attained 50% compatibility. Ling Han tried to push open the doors, and this time there was immediately feedback. You have to reach more than 90% compatibility level to be able to open the doors. Only when you reach 100% compatibility level would your own basic attributes be added onto your body. Fine, it was quite complicated. Ling Han continued to improve his compatibility. He discovered that in this process, he had gained a new understanding of the word foundation. He had always thought that he had already perfected his foundations, and this was indeed the case, but in the most basic of punches and palm strikes, he had overlooked it. This could not be blamed on him because when force could be released, no matter what technique it would no longer be limited to form. In any case, he only had to throw a punch, and the power would be delivered. It was a contest of whose power was stronger, and who could stimulate more energy from the higher levels. But now he felt that he had been wrong. Foundations definitely could not be overlooked. In a clash of equal strength, perhaps it was because whoever had the better foundations, that would lead to the final victory. This trial was very interesting. It would never take the initiative to tell you what you should do. It was all up to you to comprehend things. Ling Han nodded, no longer feeling that it was boring. Instead, he was relishing it. In this day, his compatibility had reached 60%. It had only increased by 10%, which was far from the efficiency of the first day. Starting from 0, the improvement was naturally the greatest, and Ling Han did not take it to heart. Early the next morning, he continued to cultivate. Everyone seemed to know that one had to reach more than 90% compatibility to be able to push open the palace doors, so they were all training with all their might. Very quickly, 3 days had passed. Though Ling Han had not brought the essence-nurturing gourd with him, spatial spirit tools were not affected. Thus, he still had something to eat, and did not have to worry about being hungry. His compatibility had finally increased to 90%, and what delighted him even more was the fact that he had already reached the peak stage of 6th extreme. Brother Monkey cultivation technique, the supplementary cultivation technique on the stone wall, and the recovery of the heaven and earth environment were all at the right place and right time, creating such a miracle. Ling Han began to break through to the 7th extreme. However, he did not have the slightest idea. Although in Everu 10,000 inscription tier elites, perhaps only 10 or 20 of them had reached 6th extreme before. However, this was traceable at least. However, 7th extreme hadn't even existed in Legends. He didn't even know if this cultivation level existed. Ling Han hadn't known about 7th change before. After breaking through to 6th change, the power of dimension in his body suddenly unleashed its might, helping him advance into 7th change. Thus, Ling Han didn't know whether or not he had reached the level of 7th extreme. However, no matter what, he still had to ponder over it repeatedly. If he missed this level, his path of cultivation would not be perfect. Ling Han stimulated the power of dimension in his body. In the past, he had relied on this to leap into 7th change, and now this should also be the key. However, no matter how hard he tried, the bones in his body had reached the pinnacle after the 6th change, and no matter what, he could not shed the slightest bit of bone scraps. It was possible to break through the shackles, but it would not be the metamorphosis of the bones, but rather the organs in the body. This meant that Ling Han had to advance into inscription tier. This did not match Ling Han's ideas. Time passed quietly, and everyone's compatibility with the golem was increasing. Though the higher the compatibility level, the harder it would be to improve further. 90% compatibility could still be easily touched. 2 days later, Hong Tianbu was the first to push open the palace doors. Ka, ka, ka. A loud bang was heard from the palace doors, and they opened. Even with the massive figure of the golem blocking him, Ling Han could still see the dazzling light flickering within. Was this the light of death? They would die from just having this light shine on them? Who dared to test it out with their physical body? This was taking a risk with his life. Hong Tianbu entered without hesitation. Pung, pung, pung. The golem heavily stomped on the ground, creating a loud noise. When he entered, the palace doors were closed off, and his speed was extremely fast. Even if someone wanted to take advantage of this opening to sneak in, it would be impossible. However, after only a while, Hu Er walked forwards and easily pushed open the palace doors. Ling Han saw it, and his eyes involuntarily narrowed. On the surface, Hu Er's progress was slower than Hong Tianbu's. But when he pushed open the doors, he was very relaxed. What did this mean? His compatibility with the golem should have exceeded 90%. This number 1 prodigy of the demon race really could not be underestimated. Another while later, Princess Bixiao also walked forwards and pushed open the stone door to enter. She similarly entered very easily. However, the 4th person to enter the palace was beyond Ling Han's expectations. It was actually that incredibly sturdy Mei Hua. From the looks of her, she seemed to be very foolish, and her comprehension ability was actually so high. On this day, 4 people entered, and by the 2nd day, the remaining 4 had reached 90% compatibility, one after another. They pushed open the doors and entered. Only Ling Han was left. Actually, he had long since reached 100% compatibility, but if he did not break through to 7th change, he did not want to enter. What to do? He did not have much time to waste. Though there would definitely be fierce competition among the 8 of them when they entered into the palace, and it would definitely not be smooth sailing, but as time passed, there would definitely be someone who would emerge victorious. Ling Han thought for a moment, then decided to give himself 3 days. If he didn't break through in 3 days, he could only go in. Worst come to worst, he would not break through to inscription tier first. He definitely had to build his cultivation level to perfection as much as possible. He continued to adapt to the golem's battle rhythm, and after reaching 100% compatibility, Ling Han's own attributes would be added onto the golem. Thus, his power now broke through 50,000 kilograms and was about 75,000. Going by the look of things, though there was a very big gap between each person's tier-surpassing battle prowess, when it was reflected on the rock golem, the gap had shrunk considerably. Even with how freakish he was, he had only increased his base power by 50%. A day passed very quickly, and Ling Han still did not have the slightest idea. He became even more anxious and circled around the entrance of the palace. When the sun rose on the second day, Ling Han's eyes became serious. He decided to take the risk. In the eyes of many, breaking through to 6th extreme was already good enough, but it only allowed him to go from being invincible surpassing a major tier to being undefeatable surpassing one major tier, which was still very awesome. However, for Ling Han, it was unacceptable that he hadn't climbed the tallest mountain. How could he take the risk? Actually, this was also a flash of inspiration from Ling Han. Since he had torn apart the shackles again, and inscribed the inscriptions on his internal organs, then couldn't he take the initiative to shatter the bones, and from there, stimulate the shattering of the shackles? This was indeed a risk because this might not work, but the damage done to himself was real and solid. However, Ling Han was someone who loved to take risks. He would give it his all. He sat down in a cross-legged position and began to take the initiative to slice off the bone scraps, playing out the breakthrough of extreme bone tier. It hurts, it hurts. Using his mystical power like a blade, he scraped over the bones. He had indeed scraped off a little bone scrap, but an incomparable pain immediately surged over. He gritted his teeth and immediately stopped. In the past, when he broke through, the process of scratching bones would happen on its own, and there was no need for him to stimulate it. Thus, it was painful, but he could endure it. But now, it was clearly so heart-wrenchingly painful, yet he still had to initiate it. Just like how one would feel pain when being cut by a saber, his hand would naturally stop, so how could he still be ruthless? Even if he could make a cut, he would still have to make another cut, and what about the third, the fourth? This was extremely difficult. Ling Han's fighting spirit was reignited. If it wasn't difficult, how could he have never heard of the legend of 7th extreme? Precisely because of this, only after advancing into 7th extreme would one experience an earth-shattering change. Again, Ling Han stimulated the mystical power again, slicing at his bones. However, even though cold sweat was pouring down his forehead, he didn't feel any signs of his level of being rising. Could it be that the level of 7th extreme really did not exist? Ling Han refused to believe this. Just because 7th extreme was practically impossible to realize, there were no rumors about 7th extreme in this world. If he gave up now, what difference would there be between him and a mediocre commoner? It was precisely because it unreal that, once he broke through, the battle prowess he obtained would naturally be powerful enough to strike the heavens. By the looks of it, he hadn't been cruel enough to himself. Ling Han gritted his teeth. He decided to go all out, crushing his own bones. Come! Ling Han had always been a crazy person when it came to cultivation. There was light bursting from his eyes, and his mystical power channeled, beginning to shatter his own bones. 7th change, a qualitative change that was like a complete transformation. Then he would shatter all old things and usher in a new beginning. Of course, Ling Han wasn't crazy, because even if he failed, as long as he fused with the golem, his battle prowess wouldn't be affected. Pa pa pa. Ling Han's bones continued to fracture, and he couldn't even maintain his cross-legged posture anymore. He collapsed to the ground like a sheet of loose sand. Should he continue? Continue. Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to shatter his broken bones. He broke them in half to quarters, from quarters to eighths, but there was still no change to his level of being. This was enough to strike a blow and drive him to despair, right? However, Ling Han didn't think so. He believed that in history, there must have been countless prodigies and lunatics that attempted to break through to the seventh extreme. Hadn't they thought of this move before? Again, again, again. Ling Han became even more frenzied. He began to grind his bones, and instantly he felt the approach of death. Humans could not be boneless. The bones supported the most basic form of the body, and even these bones had all turned into dust. Was he still human? Ling Han used his mystical power to simulate his bones, supported his body shape, and continued the process of shattering his bones. He was sure that the majority of people in history had been intimidated at this point. This was for the sake of pursuing the strongest, and not courting death. And there were some that had continued, yet died. Thus, he had to think of another way. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head. He began to stimulate the power of dimension in his body. As his will circulated, it instantly affected all the living beings on those dimensions. In this inner world, Ling Han was the ruler. The millions and millions of living beings all responded in unison, exuding a weak willpower towards him. It seemed to be cheering him on, but also seemed to be boosting him with some kind of power. In fact, it could even be considered a blessing. A miraculous scene finally appeared. On his broken bones, there was a glimmer of light, and the improvement of his level of being finally came slowly. Seventh extreme, begin. Pa pa pa. The shackles inside Ling Han's body started to shatter. Ling Han looked pleasantly surprised. He had finally made the right bet. No wonder no one could reach the seventh extreme, because this required the help of the millions and millions of power of dimensions inside one's body. Just ask the world, aside from Ling Han, was there a second person that came out of the divine stone and brought their own inner world? If there was no one, then it proved that Ling Han's path could not be replicated. Quang! A furious bolt of lightning rang out. Winds and clouds gathered in the heaven and earth, forming terrifying thunderclouds. Silver snakes danced wildly, as if the heavens were furious, wanting to eliminate some evil existence. It was also as if the heavens were also excited, moved by an inconceivable existence. What's going on? Why has there suddenly appeared a sudden clap of thunder? On the 9 peaks, everyone was filled with fear. The power of heaven and earth could not be fathomed, and could only be revered. Now the thunderclouds were so dense, and the shockwaves were so terrifying. To say nothing of Mystery Realm tier elites, even Celestial Path tier and above elites would probably be killed in the face of the wrath of the heavens. I heard my seniors say that only after advancing into Celestial Path would the heavenly tribulation descend as a test, someone said in a trembling voice. I have also heard of it, but the heavens' calamity is not like that. Instead, it is directly aimed at the mind and interrogates the Tao heart, the other person said. If one passes, he will be met with good fortune. If he is defeated, the spirit will be shattered, and even reincarnation would be forbidden. Is this really a heaven's calamity? There were a considerable number of people here that had come from prison. They had heard of something like the heaven's calamity, but it did not match what their seniors had said. If this was a heaven's calamity, how terrifying would it be? It would directly destroy a living being in both physical and mental terms. Woo! The heaven and earth has been disturbed again? Eldest baby stopped eating ravenously. Meanwhile, second baby swallowed the meat in her mouth and said, "Such an astonishing phenomenon of heaven and earth. What kind of freakish freak has appeared again?" "It should be father," third baby said with certainty. This proud child had the most confidence in Ling Han. "Second, try tracing it back to its source," fourth baby said. Second baby nodded and activated her ocular technique, chasing after the karma of the phenomenon. It's indeed targeting the palace in the sky, but there are 1, 2, 7, 6, 5, 3-12 people there, so it's not definite that it is father. Second baby counted with her hand for a while, then looked at the other 6 children and said, "It must be father." Fourth baby nodded. 100% father. Fifth baby nodded as well. To be able to be so freakish, who else could it be but father? Sixth baby concluded. Seventh baby had fallen asleep at some point in time, and was presently snoring. Her small mouth was slightly open, and she was drooling. It was unknown what delicious food she had thought of. And in the palace in the skies, the people inside did not have the slightest reaction, because the soundproofing of this palace was very good. No one could hear the commotion that was taking place outside, and the competition was presently incredibly intense, so how could they possibly have the mood to care about anything else? Ling Han swallowed a treasured fruit of life as he tore through his shackles. Pa pa pa. The shackles were endlessly torn apart, and after more than an hour, 19 had already been torn open. However, the energy of the first treasured fruit of life was also exhausted. Fuck! This was a mystery realm tier-level treasured fruit. It was so weak. Ling Han mocked internally, yet grabbed another treasured fruit of life and ingested it without hesitation. This treasured fruit was meant for him to break through, so what need was there for him to be reluctant? On the contrary, the more treasured fruits one ate, it meant that the greater the improvement this time was, which was a good thing. It was a very good thing, something that others couldn't even beg for. As expected of 7th extreme, unattainable in this world. The improvement brought by this breakthrough was also incredibly terrifying. Ling Han only needed to do one thing now, and that was to tear open the shackles as much as possible. He no longer needed to care about his bones. After the breakthrough of 7th extreme began, his bones underwent a qualitative change. Originally, he had ground them into granules, and now these bone granules were further compressed, bone scraps excreted, and the remaining essence part was reconstructing. More than an hour later, Ling Han ingested the third treasured fruit of life. He was even a little shocked. The leap of 7th extreme was too terrifying, wasn't it? The improvement of the level of being was completely unstoppable. Ling Han ingested treasured fruit after treasured fruit. Thankfully, after ingesting the 8th treasured fruit, this rate of evolution finally slowed down. This delay only lasted for half an hour, and the process of 7th extreme finally ended. Ling Han did some calculations. He had broken through at least over 100 shackles. What kind of concept was this? Many people may not have broken through so many shackles altogether, from blood transformation all the way to mystery realm tier. Then wouldn't Ling Han be capable of matching the battle prowess of mystery realm tier elites? This could not be calculated that way. Cultivation level was cultivation level, and this was real and solid. Furthermore, Ling Han had broken through even more of his shackles, which would make his battle prowess in this cultivation level even more terrifying, and allow him to rush to a higher height in future. Actually, the latter was more important. The benefit of the leap in level of being was that the upper limit of his mystical power could be increased again. Additionally, there was also the improvement of his spiritual power. This was a leap. Unfortunately, this was still not enough to release the Empress and the others. He, who was weaker in abilities, could send them out, but they could not withstand the pressure of this world, and would be directly reduced to ashes. Furthermore, their own abilities were too strong, so Ling Han still could not move them. Going by this trend, if he could still break the limits of his cultivation level at every cultivation level, then perhaps in Enlightenment tier or Mystery Realm tier, he would be enough to bring heavenly venerable tier-level creatures out of the inner world. He had experienced it himself, and believed that heavenly venerable tier elites should be able to withstand the pressure of this heaven and earth. The day of a true reunion with his family and friends was not far off. Ling Han had mastered Brother Monkey cultivation technique and the secret technique of the stone wall. Coupled with the heaven and earth environment that had almost recovered, his cultivation speed could be said to be overwhelmingly fast. As long as he had enough treasured fruits of life, he was confident that he could rush up to the Mystery Realm tier within a year. However, he only had one treasured fruit of life left in his possession, and even if breaking through to the inscription tier wasn't as freakish as breaking through to the 7th extreme, he still needed 8 Mystery Realm tier-level treasured fruits of life. However, there was only one. Would that be enough? He had to prepare a few more, right? Ling Han sighed. As it turned out, the fast advancement of cultivation level also had such a problem. If this was known to others, they would definitely scold him for showing off. Anyone would want to have this kind of trouble. Ling Han glanced at the golem and decided not to waste any more time. He was already a few days behind. He assimilated with the golem and after getting used to it slightly, he immediately went to push open the doors to the palace. Without much effort, the door was opened. His current power was probably 100,000 kilograms. When he was in 6th extreme, his power was 75 uk. This was only an increase of a minor level of cultivation level, and there was actually such a great leap. 7th extreme was indeed freakish. Ling Han believed that his current battle prowess was enough to match the middle stage or even the late stage of the Enlightenment tier, and after breaking through to the Inscription tier, it was obviously no issue for him to sweep aside all other Enlightenment tier opponents. He controlled the golem and walked into the palace. The light was blinding. Thankfully, he was in a clay figure, so his eyes couldn't see things, so it didn't matter. His divine sense could sense objects, but couldn't see the color, so there was absolutely no difference whether there was light or not. He strode forwards. Having fallen behind by so many days, it was unknown where the 8 people in front of him had reached.